Good morning. I'll call the meeting to order for the purpose of electing a chair. If I could have nominations at this point for the position of chair. I'm looking for a nomination for the position of chair, please. Don?
Peter Gower for chair.
And is there a seconder? Councillor Doherty. And Mr. Gower, would you accept the position if you were elected? Okay. Are there any other nominations for the position of chair at this time? Seeing none, I'll close nominations and I'll call the question that Mr. Gower be elected chair of Heritage Kingston. All those in favor? Opposed? And while Mr. Gower sets up at the front here, I'll ask for nominations for the position of vice chair. Would someone like to nominate someone, please? Councillor Neal? And is there a seconder? Yes. Okay. And Don, I assume you would accept that post if you were elected. Are there any other nominations to come forward? Seeing none, I'll close nominations and I'll call the question. All those in favor that Mr. Taylor be elected as vice chair? And opposed, and that carries. And I'll pass the chair to Mr. Gower.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for putting trust in somebody most of you don't know. And I will always make my opening comment on this, that when you lose that trust, please let the committee secretary or the vice chair know that you'd like a change. I want at some point to fit in an introduction of people. Do it right now? Okay, so in between 2 and 3, few of us know each other. So if we could start, Jane, with you maybe? Not 5 minutes, but enough to let us get to know you.
Hi, good morning, Jane McFarlane. I've served on Heritage Kingston since March of 2018, so relatively new here. And I actually am the owner of a heritage property, one of Hale Cottages, and my background is in teaching, and then I became a carpenter, so that's about all.
Thanks. Yes, I've been on this committee for close to 18 years, so I'm the granddaddy, I guess. I've lived nearly 50 years in downtown Kingston. I've owned and renovated 3 or 4 heritage buildings, so it's given me a lot of practical experience. In my real life, I was a physics professor at Queen's. I'm retired now, of course. As I say, I've been vice chair of this committee for a while, so I think I've learned work. Sometimes they don't always work, but I hope that I can help us get this committee working in the right way. Thanks.
Hello, good morning. My name is Zoe Harris. I'm currently working as the marketing coordinator for Diamond. I do mostly graphic design, collateral production. My professional life is very artistic, which is a lot of fun for me. I also have a background in English literature from my degree at Queen's. Right now, I've been living in Kingston for approximately 9 years, and I've loved every minute of it. My husband and I just recently bought a century home downtown. I have kind of a personal passion for heritage buildings, as I've lived in heritage buildings and century homes my entire life. So that's what led me to become part of this committee. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Matthew McCartney. I'm a Kingstonian for my entire life. I've been a stonemason for 10 years, predominantly doing conservation-based projects, and now just contributing a bit through this committee, I guess, and I have a bit of training, like through an apprenticeship, as well as like a partway through a conservation degree for historic building conservation. So hopefully that'll be of use. Thanks.
Jim Neal, I'm a city councilor from Williamsville, also currently the chair of planning, and I'm looking forward to serving on this, so thank you.
Bridget Doherty, councillor for Portsmouth District. And so I'm new to the community too, and a councillor, but my background, my husband and I together, we have renovated quite a few buildings, as well as designed new build that elementary to downtown. And so I have some planning experience and design experience, and I'm interested in building too. Thanks.
Thank you. And Jeffa?
My name's Jennifer Demitor. I am a local architect. I've worked on several heritage buildings in Kingston. I did my internship in Charlottetown. I again worked on heritage buildings. I'm very excited to be part of the committee as well.
And so we're missing Ashley. Yes. Okay. The agenda. Need an approval for the agenda. Do we have a mover to approve the agenda? Jim, thank you. Seconder. Bridget, an addendum, which I believe is on your desks. Item 9, the withdrawal of the report on 47 Wellington Street. So that comes off of the agenda that was circulated. Discussion, further additions. Seeing none, I'll call a vote. Those in favour of the agenda as printed with the addendum, you have an agenda. Now, the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of November, I believe Don and Jane were the only two that were present, so if one of you would like to move the adoption and the other would like to second, this is always one of the awkward things we get on as committees change over. So Jane will move the adoption of those minutes. Don will second. Is there discussion? Don.
Yes, I guess we can't all see the minutes. In fact, I didn't bring my copy here, but in reading them, I noticed that a couple of places it was stated that Stroud made some comments, but it didn't include the comments. And I think that's a little bit unfortunate because at the end of the meeting, he made some important comments. And I can't repeat his words, of course, but I'd like to add a sentence to page 11 of the minutes. There's a section that says, Stroud provided comment regarding process. And I would like to add a sentence. He described committee procedures as dysfunctional and stated that he will not accept reappointment to the committee. So I'd like to add that sentence to the minutes. Do you want a copy of that? Or?
Yes, if we could, please.
Just per practice, we won't be in Councilor Stroud's comments on his behalf. This came up in other business, and it wasn't duly sort of the agenda, so it wasn't sort of like an open session on the committee and that type of thing. So it's more of a general thing, right?
So we don't. Okay, Don, so as I understand it, we will not add to Councillor Stroud's comment since he is not here, but we've noted your comments. And I think they're on today, which they could be reintroduced as well. Okay. Other comments on the minutes of November 21st? Seeing none, call for a motion. Those in favour? Who can vote on this? Just those who were there? Oh, everybody can. Okay. Those in favour of the approval? Those opposed? They carry. Disclosure of pecuniary. I presume we're going to be talking a little bit more about pecuniary interest. And I think at this point, unless you know for sure, I will rather let you hear the presentations and then make your declaration when we get to the particular items. Anybody know that they are in pecuniary interest on any of the items? Seeing none, then, you will assure me that you will tell me later on. Presentations. Okay, oh, I see. We've got no delegations, so we go over through the briefings. Mr. Greg Newman, Manager, Policy Planning. Do you want to go first? Have you got an order? This multimedia, super, IMAX?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think this is going to be a team effort, so...
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I'm joined by a number of members of both the Cultural Services and Planning, Building and Licensing teams. We have staff that oversee both elements for the city, and I'm here this morning. Colin Wigington and I, he's the Cultural Director of the city. I'm Paige Agnew, I'm the Director of Planning, Building and Licensing for the city. We wanted to provide just some high strategic comments from our point of view as directors overseeing these groups. In terms of the overall orientation, our team has worked hard to pull together what I think is a very thorough and detailed presentation to help orient the committee, and there's a number of new members. There's certainly lots of interesting information that you're going to receive this morning, but I do want to emphasize that we're always available to answer your questions anytime outside of committee as well. You can email, call us, and we'll make ourselves available. Should you require an in-person meeting to discuss a file, if you need technical related to being able to access information through Dash, which is our online management system for applications, we can arrange individual training for you as well if you ever have any of the technical challenges associated with the technology, because it's quite important that you be able to access the information on anything coming to the committee whenever it's convenient for you. So just in terms of some high-level comments, again, related to today's orientation, Colin and I have been working together very closely as directors for the last 4 years, and we've been working specifically to look at opportunities for greater integration of the work between cultural services and planning, building, and licensing services. And that's been for some very specific and strategic reasons that we're going to talk to you about today, and how the work and the important work fits into all of that, and the work that you'll see coming from our teams and the recommendations. Specifically in and around integrating planning processes, Colin and I, through our groups, again, we have large groups of staff that are working on master planning documents like the city's official plan, the culture plan. We're doing detailed planning policy work. And what we've been trying to do over the last 4 years in particular is to ensure that there is a much more deliberate approach to bringing notions of both cultural and built heritage into land use planning policy, so that these things aren't treated as separate notions or separate pieces of work that are going on over here in the city. We're really trying to look for the overlap, and there's really specific reasons about that and how that really works to advance specifically the vitality and the overall sustainability of a city, and especially one as Kingston that is so rich in its built in its cultural heritage. Colin's going to speak to you just a little bit in terms of the asset-related work, and then I'm going to come back and talk to you a little bit about how we're focusing on not just the tangible, but the intangible cultural heritage as well.
Thanks, Paige. A lot of what she's been referencing are part of global trends that Kingston is trying to keep pace with. Certainly, we're very much more focused now than we were in the past on broader concepts of cultural heritage, and Paige has already referenced that in terms of tangible, intangible, and natural. And certainly in terms of the Cultural Services Department, a big part of our work has been bringing to light some of the assets that the City of Kingston is responsible for that haven't been as readily recognized. And one thing that we should note in particular is our civic collection. When the Cultural Services Department was established, it wasn't being managed in a consistent and strategic way, and that's a big piece of work that we've done. And one of the most notable evidences of that is the Mayor's Portrait Collection in City Hall, which is noted as one of the largest municipal portrait collections in Canada, so it's not insignificant. And bringing those kinds of assets to light, and also the restoration of assets like the Engine 1095 in front of City Hall, are contributing to that broader landscape of preserving those tangible elements that we are responsible for. But it also extends to built heritage as well, so we're responsible for the Grand Theatre, the Pump House Steam Museum, and the Tet Centre, which are also heritage buildings that have been renovated at various times and brought into the 21st century as assets that celebrate the built heritage, but also as a platform for programming. And that kind of work is really significant to this committee, and it's something that's supported through two of the working groups that you'll learn about, which are the Cultural Heritage Assets Working Group, as well as the Cultural Heritage Working Group as well. So I'll hand it back to Paige.
In terms of the city's major documents, our official plan is our 20-year guiding document that looks at how we want to grow and facilitate growth and change as a community over a long horizon of time. The official plan has always had elements of culture and cultural preservation, even notions of cultural heritage built within the policies. Mr. Newman's group in the last couple of years, you have to do an update, the five-year update to the official plan as part of the provincial regulation, and we just went through a very significant exercise. It started in 2015. We got that approved in 2017 through council. There are certainly elements of that were discussed through the committee and through consultation, and there was a big focus on really trying to embed a lot more specific detail about the importance of notions of cultural and built heritage relative to the land use planning process, and how that we ensure as a city that we're adequately preserving the key elements here that we need to preserve, but we're also understanding the stories, the people, the history, and how that's influenced our settlement patterns over time, and how we want to continue to bring those things to life for the community. And one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit today, but certainly this will be an ongoing topic going forward, is the notion of placemaking. And in planning, placemaking is a bit of a buzzword, I would say, but it's really focused from a principal point of view, is looking at your city, anything new that's coming, how does that establish a sense of place? How does that reference people that have come before us and their stories? How do we specifically plan a city to create really interesting places for people to gather, things that keep people in the streets, in the downtown, in our communities, things that draw tourists and other people to our city as visual interests? So this notion of placemaking, you're going to hear that term, I think, a number of times throughout your term on this committee. It's certainly something that we're talking about very strongly at Planning Committee as well, and you will see that going forward. But I did want to reference that today. And the notion of placemaking, specifically, again, it helps to really strengthen the identity of places. It can help foster a sense of pride and connectivity. And we really talk about in Kingston of wanting to build a truly inclusive community. And what does that look like from a diversity perspective, not only of people, but of places, of experiences, that creating attachment. And again, from an overall tourism perspective, tourism forms a very important part of our economic and cultural vitality as a city. And that's something that all of our groups work to foster through the development of policy and project work that we're doing. And certainly there's very important elements of that will come before you'll be contributing to as well. So just again, wanted to bring up some of these higher level strategic ideas and the reason why the importance and the broad mandate of this committee looking at both cultural and built heritage is so critical, not just related to specific applications that you see, but related to major policy planning and project documents that are going to be coming forward. And our team is going to talk about some of those today specifically, but really about the longevity and what this does as an overall master planning process for a city to try to continue to be the vital city that we've always been, to give reference and reverence to key principal things that have happened in terms of built architecture and form and building, but also our stories, and then how those things influence the way that people experience our city now and give them a sense of connection.
Thanks, Paige. And it's been really exciting for us in Cultural Services. This morning, you'll meet my colleague, Jennifer Campbell, who's the manager of Cultural Heritage, then Paige and her team in planning, building, and licensing, that we've been able to bring the issues that we focus forward into those policy frameworks. So as Paige has mentioned, the most recent review plan led to the inclusion in that document of significant sections related to cultural heritage, to arts and culture, to public art as of cultural heritage landscapes that you'll be hearing about this morning. And on a practical level, with those kinds of changes, we've also been much more engaged in projects led by planning, including something called the North Kingstown Secondary Plan that some of you might be familiar with. And Jennifer's been contributing to that to a significant degree and helping planning, looking at the area that is North Kingstown and the ability to make sure that that planning document not only captures a broad range of heritage assets, the tangible, the intangible, the natural, which are so significant to that part of Kingston, but also looking at how we capture that are part of the history of that place. And a not insignificant part of that work has been engaging the Indigenous community here in Kingston as part of that work. So that's kind of the evidence that you'll see over time of this important kind of integration that we're achieving. And also you'll be hearing this morning from Jennifer about a couple of our initiatives called Your Stories, Our Histories, which is looking at local history, as well as Engage for Change, which is an effort on our part to work on behalf of the corporation to engage Kingston's Indigenous community. So before we hand it over to Greg Newman and Jennifer Campbell to lead the rest of the orientation, we just wanted to highlight the fact that this committee gives a really unique in Kingston to be strategically about the work that we want to do, about how we can situate the built heritage, which is such a defining feature of Kingston, within the broader landscape, and that we can leverage these things to achieve the kinds of outcomes that Paige has referenced in terms of placemaking, and that this really is about how things need to function in this moment in time. And as I referenced at the beginning, these are really about responding to global trends and bringing those practices into a Kingston context so that Kingston, which has always been recognized as a leader in the heritage area, can continue to do so in a new and expanded way. So I will hand it over to, I believe, Greg Newman at this point to lead you through the rest of the orientation package.
Okay, so I think I've just been slides that I wasn't prepared to speak to, but I will do my best. So the mandate of the committee, as Colin and Paige have just gone through, is broader than just looking at the built or the tangible cultural heritage components of the city. I think Colin and Paige did a good job of recognizing that the mandate of this committee is to also talk about the intangible and the natural. And so you'll see on the agenda after this orientation, Ms. Campbell will be speaking to a number of the projects that she's overseeing that speak to some of the intangible pieces of Kingston's cultural heritage. You'll look for your non-statutory responsibilities, and I'll get into that a bit, and you are ultimately an advisory committee to council. I think I've spoken to this, and we can certainly go through the mandate in detail as you progress in your role here, but I'm going to jump over this. Paige and Colin introduced the structure of the staffing component that supports this committee. Paige Agnew is the Director of Planning, Building, and Licensing, Colin the Director of Culture, Jennifer Campbell is the Manager of Cultural Heritage, and I'm the Manager of Policy. We have Ryan Leary, who is a Senior Heritage Planner, Alex Rouse-Thompson, who is a Heritage Planner, who is also a Heritage Planner supporting the portfolio of work that we do. We also have Paul Robertson, who's not here today, but he is a City Curator supporting a lot of the work that we do. Later on today in the agenda, you'll have an opportunity to voice your interest in potentially joining one of the 3 working groups that support this committee. So we have the Heritage Properties Working Group, which Ryan largely oversees. So it's a group made up of councillors, committee members, and members of the public that look at potential designations of properties to the Heritage Properties Register. Jennifer oversees the Cultural Heritage Working Group, primarily responsible for the intangible heritage resources within the city. And I'll leave it to Jen if she wants to elaborate on some of that work. You're going to get pieces of this with each agenda. We report back to the committee with heritage, with working group sort of meeting notes and summaries. So on each agenda, you'll see kind of status updates I'm working on. And lastly, the Heritage Assets Working Group, which I believe is co-managed between Jen and Paul, and they look at things that support the city's museums, civic collections, and other heritage assets. So to give you a bit of a context for the statutory components of what it is that we try to bring to this committee, there are two pieces of legislation that largely guide what we bring to this committee. The Planning Act, which is the document kind of shown on the left there in blue, and the Ontario Heritage Act. So the Planning Act is ultimately the rule book for decisions that affect the use of land and development growth in the city. It establishes the framework, things like plans of subdivision, new lot creation, changes in land use, so zoning, and then it's supported by a series of provincial policy matters. The provincial policy statement is a document that outlines what those provincial interests, a fundamental one as it relates to this committee is the conservation of cultural heritage resources. Ultimately, what the provincial policy statement says, and I'll read it here just because it is fundamental to what this group's mandate is it says significant built heritage resources and significant cultural heritage landscapes shall be conserved, and the language in the provincial policy statement is very important. So the work that the city does in the review of any Planning Act application must be consistent with policy objectives, so we are obligated through the Planning Act to make sure that we're making decisions that help to conserve our cultural heritage resources. Another relevant provincial policy, as outlined in the PPS, the provincial policy statement, says planning authorities shall not permit development and site alteration to protected heritage properties except where the proposed development and site alteration has been evaluated and it has been demonstrated that the heritage attributes of the property will be conserved. So this is one of the tests that our heritage planning staff look at when we're looking at a proposed alteration to a designated heritage property. Will the attributes of that property as outlined in the designation bylaw be conserved over the long term? And lastly, we have the official local planning document. It's essentially the blueprint for growth in the city. Over a 20-year horizon, it establishes goals, objectives, and policies to help form decision-making. And I think of particular relevance to this committee is Section 7 of the official plan. I'd encourage you to take a deep read through that. And it essentially establishes a policy framework for looking at applications for land use change or development that have the potential to impact a cultural heritage resource. I'm going to speak in a moment here to cultural heritage landscapes and how we can better recognize and conserve landscapes, which may be a little broader than just, say, the dentils on the facade of a building. More specific, I think the content that you're going to see are proposed alterations to designated heritage properties. So the Ontario Heritage Act establishes the framework for designating properties in Ontario. Part 4 of the Act speaks to the designation of individuals. It also sets out the framework for looking at things like heritage easements, as well as the listing of properties on the municipal heritage. And then Part 5 of the Heritage Act speaks to the designation of groupings of properties and the creation of cultural heritage conservation districts. The Act also explicitly identifies when this committee is to be consulted on proposed alterations of properties. So regarding cultural heritage landscapes, and this is a component of the mandate, it starts to sort of migrate from the more physical, tangible components of a cultural heritage resource into some of the intangible pieces that Jen and Colin and their teams look after. So UNESCO and the Ontario Heritage tried sort of 3 categories of cultural heritage landscapes. Those are designed and associative. Designed landscapes are places like Market Square, just over our shoulder here, city parks that are clearly designed We have evolved landscapes that have evolved through use by people and activities that have directly shaped the landscape or the area. So the city's downtown core, Sydenham District, there is taken from Kingston Penitentiary. So these are things where maybe the activities are either continuing or they have stopped, but that there is a reflection of the way that those landscapes went. And lastly, associative landscapes have powerful religious, artistic, or cultural associations. Examples include the Hangman's Yard behind the Frontenac County Courthouse, Bell Island, which has strong associations with Kingston's First Peoples groups, and then shipwrecks in Kingston's harbor. So one of the questions you might ask is, well, how do I have a meaningful impact on the conservation of these landscapes? So you can designate cultural heritage landscapes, and this is a clause in the provincial policy statement that says that it's essentially the definition of cultural heritage landscape, having cultural heritage value or interest by the community, but we have the opportunity to conserve these landscapes through recognition in a heritage property designation bylaw. So if the landscape is solely within a property, we can designate it as an attribute within Part 4 designation, which applies to an individual property. Or the landscape covers more than one property, it covers a grouping of properties, and then we can start to look at whether or not it makes sense to try and conserve that landscape through the creation of a heritage district, cultural heritage district, under Part 5 of the Act. The one thing we don't have in the presentation here, but that Jennifer and I have started to try to wrap our heads around, is whether or not there are opportunities to give recognition to cultural heritage landscapes within the official plan of the city. So the City of Kitchener, for example, in their official plan, they've areas that capture the cultural heritage landscapes within that community. They recognize those in the official plan, within mapping within the official plan. Policy requirements when there's proposed land use change or development within or adjacent to these landscapes that could have an impact on it. So these are some of the things that we're looking at trying out in the City of Kingston. I think Colin had mentioned the North Kingstown secondary plan, and this could very well have within it a recommendation that we recognize within the official plan specific cultural heritage landscapes. There have been a lot of members of the public that have conveyed an interest in conserving some of the lands along the waterfront, and perhaps those into a cultural heritage landscape that then gets recognized both within the official plan and perhaps within one of the mechanisms in the Ontario Heritage Act. Lastly, there's an opportunity to recognize individual properties or groupings of properties within the listing within the Municipal Heritage Register. And with that, I'm going to segue over to Alex to speak to the Heritage Register. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Alex Rose Thompson, and I'm one of the heritage planners. So I'm going to introduce the Heritage Properties Register, which is required under the Ontario Heritage Act, and essentially it is a register of all properties that have been evaluated as having cultural heritage value or interest. In the City of Kingston, we have approximately 1,400 properties on our register, and that includes both properties that have been designated or listed using tools under the Ontario Heritage Act, as well as designated or sort of recognized at a federal or even global scale. So we've got one UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Rideau Canal. We've got 25 National Historic Sites, 24 FIBRO properties, which stands for the Federal Heritage Building Review Office. And essentially, those are properties owned by the federal government, and they don't relate so much to properties as specific buildings. So at Kingston Pen, there's a number of FIBRO buildings. And then under the Ontario Heritage Act, Greg had mentioned started to mention some of those tools. You're going to hear a lot of, it sounds like jargon at first, Part 4, Part 5, and it'll start to become very familiar, but those are essentially individually designated properties, of which we have about 580. We have about 640 Part 5s, which are the Heritage Conservation District properties. And we also have about 366 listed properties. So I'm now going to, at a sort of high level with a little bit more detail, explain what each of those types of properties are. And obviously, by all means, keep asking us questions as these properties come up in applications moving forward. So listed properties are enabled by 7 of the Ontario Heritage Act, which essentially allows us to list properties on the register that we believe to be of cultural heritage value or interest, but we have not yet formally designated them. What this really means in terms of property ownership in the community is that if it wants to demolish a listed building, they need to give council 60 days of notice of that intention. And essentially that 60 days gives us the chance to establish whether or not we need them under the Act, or whether there are any other sort of tools or negotiation that we may want to initiate. And in terms of your role, council shall consult with the Heritage Kingston Committee prior to listing any new properties or removing a property from the register. So individual property designations, which you'll hear often referred to as Part 4, so that's something you're going to hear over and over again, which I'm sure will get drilled into your heads. Part 4s are when we've designated one single individual property, which, as you can see on the screen, can capture all sorts of types of properties, including houses, institutional buildings, churches, cemeteries. And essentially, these are enabled by Section 29, and they have been identified as having cultural heritage value or interest. And the current way that we do that is through Regulation 906, which sets out certain types of criteria so that we can, as objectively as possible, evaluate whether they have physical design value, historical or associative values, as well as contextual values. There's a sort of accepted system of looking at these buildings and understanding the types of values that they may have. So once they're designated, we adopt a bylaw, and typically that bylaw will include, and best practice, it will include a statement of cultural heritage value or interest, which sets out what those values are that we've identified through our assessment under Regulation 906. And importantly, it identifies heritage attributes, which are basically physical attributes of the building or property that we want to conserve and we want to manage any sort of change to. So if, for example, if you were to reference page 37 of the package today, you'll notice a statement of cultural heritage value, an older one, albeit, and you'll see that there's lots of different versions of these statements. They're becoming more consistent for 948 Highway 2. So that one, if you just want to start getting familiar with what they might look like. So under the Act, any demolition, removal or alterations that are likely to impact those heritage attributes that have been specified require council. So in other words, a heritage permit. Additionally, council will consult or shall consult with the committee before designating or de-designating or amending a designation bylaw for these properties. And I also want to mention one last, another designation under the section Part 4 of the Act is a heritage easement agreement. We don't see these as much, but essentially it's an agreement that's made between the city and the property owner. It can also be made between the Ontario Heritage Trust and the property owner, which it's sort of a tailored approach to identifying the cultural heritage value of the property, but it also allows the city and that property owner to sometimes make quite a tailored approvals process specifically to that property, and it often gets used in sort of complex developments where there's a lot happening. You can actually sort of predict some future changes on the site and putting specific regulations. So an example, in the city, we're currently updating the heritage easement agreement with Queen's University, which has a number of property on it. So moving along to what now you're going to hear Part 5s, which are also known as Heritage Conservation Districts. You'll hear them referred to as districts or HCDs, and I'm sure it will all become very familiar soon. Kingston currently has 3 Heritage Conservation Districts, and these are enabled by Section 41 of the Act, which essentially allow the council of the municipality to either designate the entire municipality, not something that happens usually, or areas within the municipality as HCDs. These designations can be found in urban areas, rural areas. They can be residential, they can be commercial, industrial, they could be rural landscape or entire village or hamlet. And it's worth noting here too, as was mentioned, that a cultural heritage landscape could indeed be designated as a Part 5 HCD under the Act. So under the Ontario Heritage Act, again, any alteration to these properties within a district or HCD require prior approval from council. In other words, a heritage permit is required, and there's one unless it is a minor alteration that has been identified in the accompanying plan that is exempt. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So I just want to introduce the 3 HCDs that we do have so that they're somewhat familiar if they aren't already. So the first one I'm going to Sydenham, which was designated in 2015. You can find the old Sydenham HCD plan in your resource package on page 525. So the old Sydenham area is a mature downtown residential neighborhood bounded by major institutions and the lake. It contains properties that represent over 200 years of history and are some of the finest examples of 19th century construction in Canada. It has a generous park base that is both a place of recreation and remembrance. It remains an area with a mixture of incomes and tenancies, and the area is built to a human scale that encourages experiencing on foot. And I'm sure most of the area, whether you think of it as an HCD, you probably know it as quite a special part of the city in terms of experience the downtown and the residential area. So in contrast, the village of Berryfield certainly has more of a distinctly rural village setting and character. It's actually the oldest HCD in Ontario, sometimes controversial. It was designated in 1979 by the Township of Pittsburgh, but approved by the board in 1981. I believe another HCD may have slid in that 2-year delay, but we're still maintaining it's the oldest. So the Berryfield Heritage Conservation District is an evolving cultural landscape comprised of a 19th century village that developed on a street grid and now contains new street structures and landscape features while still retaining much of its 19th century village character and rural atmosphere. And if you want to reference the plan, it is on page 620 of your resource package. And it has had several updates to the plan carried out most recently in 2016. So lastly, Market Square, it's our second oldest district, which was designated in 1980 and most recently updated the plan in 2013. So the City of Kingston's Market Square, we're all in Market Square right now too, I should mention if you haven't already realized that we're in the HCD, forms a trapezoid in the heart of downtown Kingston. It's bounded on 3 sides by a diverse yet harmonious ensemble of commercial and institutional properties dating from the early 19th century, located on an historic grid of streets including King, Clarence, Market, Ontario, and Brock Streets. The center of the district is the site of the historic marketplace dating from 1801, Kingston's City Hall, which is also a National Historic Site, and occupies most of the eastern district boundary along Ontario Street. So these are the 3 district plans on the screen in front of you, all included in your resource package. And under the Ontario Heritage Act, you must have, when you designate an HCD, you adopt a plan that accompanies that district. And the Act is very specific on what that district plan must include, which is a statement of objectives, a statement of cultural heritage value, a description of the district heritage attributes, and those are the properties within the district, policy statements, guidelines, and procedures for achieving those stated objectives, and managing future changes, and option of external alterations that are of a minor nature and be carried out without a heritage permit. So we encourage you to familiarize yourself with these plans as they're vital in all of our assessments of these alterations. So Heritage Kingston Committee, staff, and council, when we're assessing applications, we are referencing these plans. This is how we determine whether or not the cultural heritage value and attributes of the district are being conserved in that change. We also encourage applicants and designers to be referencing those plans as they develop their applications through the design process. And we really encourage you, when you provide feedback on an application, to reference those plans as far as possible. That's extremely helpful to us. So as you review these plans, I think you'll notice that they all have that required content, but that every plan is quite different. And that's simply the fact that every plan is tailored to address each unique set of cultural heritage values and attributes, and also the different aspirations, concerns, development pressures that are within a community. So they're very much developed in consultation with the community and what is happening on the ground. So you'll notice that they are all fairly different in how maybe even the tone and the types of language used, but they do have all those key sections. And ultimately, the successful implementation of these basically depends on widespread public support. And critical to gaining this support is that the community has a clear understanding of those objectives for the HCD, as well as the policies and guidelines that we have in the plan. And I would encourage you, if you're interested in learning more about Part 4 or Part 5 designations, the Ontario Heritage Toolkit has specific booklets on each of those items, and they're very informative, and they're intended to be sort of understandable to the community. And I'm now going to pass it on to my colleague, Ryan Leary.
Thanks, Alex. And I should start by saying that any of these documents that we're referencing today, as the toolkit and the district plans, if you like to actually hold on to a document in your hands, they are available in hard copy downstairs at the Heritage Resource Center, which is on the first floor of this building, and Thursdays in January, and one of us will be there to help point you in the right direction. But all these materials are there as hard copies. So, good morning. My name is Ryan Leary. I'm the Senior Heritage Planner. I too am a born and bred Kingstonian. So, I'm going to walk you through the approval process and the heritage permits, which is the sort of most common statutory role for this committee. And sort of explain what is involved and what we do on the back end. Despite the common misconception that heritage buildings are locked in time and can't be changed, they do change, they evolve. That evolution is actually part of its character in a lot of cases. And the role of require approval is to review those, to manage that change, so to conserve what makes those properties special and of heritage value. So there is a process for looking at that. Now, saying that not every change requires a heritage permit. Some changes the way the Heritage Act is set up, if it's an individually designated property, if changes are likely to impact the use of that property, then you might need a permit. Under a district plan, if a change is noted as exempt from needing a permit, then you don't need a permit. On top of that, things like interior changes to properties, under Part 4 individual properties, some can have interior attributes. Largely that's uncommon. So most interior changes don't require any prior approval. Basic maintenance, things like landscaping is, again, fairly uncommon to be an attribute, so those type of things don't need permits. And then on top of that, minor changes, things like re-roofing, painting, that kind of thing, window repairs, repairs to existing features, those type of things, the approval for those changes have been delegated to the Director of Planning, Building and Licensing. So we do a lot of that in-house, and they don't come before this committee. As well as things like minor repointing, those type of things. Now, I would note that the delegated authority, the way it's set up under the Act, heritage staff and the Director of Planning cannot deny an application. So it's important to note if there's ever an alteration that comes in that meets our approval authority, yet we can't support it, those type of alterations will come before this committee for comment and council for approval. Similarly, any demolition or relocation applications also are not approvable as will to come to council for approval. Larger applications, things like additions to heritage properties, more significant or outside of our scope of our approval authority, to come to this committee for review and council for approval. And in some cases, if it's a significant change, as with one of the files that was before you today but has since been withdrawn, we encourage the applicant to come in for what we call pre-consultation. That gives some of these larger projects, the applicants like the opportunity to run their ideas by the committee to get feedback before they for final approval. And that's a good opportunity for the committee to provide advice early on in the process, and the committee and the owners can make changes as necessary and come back with a more complete application when they do their approvals, when they do the permit. So in terms of the process, we also are submitted and uploaded through our DASH program, the Development and Services Hub, which you will be getting training on, I believe, in a couple of weeks. But just is a online application system where applicants submit their applications digitally. They upload submitting their information digitally, and we circulate digitally. So it's a way of cutting down on paper, more efficient, and it's also a way where members of the public, yourselves, actually go on the DASH system and find out what's the status of an application, where things are at, what else is happening in the neighborhood in terms of applications that are submitted. So currently we also do all our Planning Act applications through the DASH system. So when an applicant submits their application in DASH, the procedural bylaw, which is in your package, outlines a number of materials that we may require. We typically require site plan, actual plans of what is being changed, what is being added, detail write-up in some cases. If it's a significant change, particularly if it's individual, don't have the benefit of guidelines and policies of the district plan. We will ask for a heritage impact statement, which is a bit of a report from a heritage consultant who look at the impact of the changes and make recommendations. Those documents are uploaded into Dash when they make their application. Staff communicate quite extensively with the applicants throughout the process. We always visit the site, always go out and have a look at the site, and we encourage members of this committee, when they get a circulation for these, to go out and have a quick look at the site. If it's the property has access issues or visibility issues where it requires actually onto the property, we will organize a site visit with you folks and invite you out to have a look, and we'll have the applicant and their agent present to answer questions and walk us around. In some cases, if it's a more significant, it's good to have a chance to talk informally and get some clarification where necessary. So we certainly encourage you to attend those. The email before you is a typical circulation email that you'll receive from the Dash program. It will give you the information on who the assigned heritage planner is. So if you have questions, please contact us, send us an email, give us a call, and we can answer questions ahead of time. It also gives you links to the actual file on Dash, so you can go in and submit your comments. And again, the training is forthcoming. So. Comments that you provide in Dash are then considered by staff as part of our review. They're included in the agenda package reports. So I would just make you aware, and you'll get this in your training as well. Whatever you provide to us in writing will be record. So just keep that in mind when you're writing your comments. So these are just a few of the documents that we look at when we're doing our review. We encourage you to look at these and be familiar with these documents yourselves. I believe they were all sent to you as part of your orientation package. I'm sure you've all read them now. Again, they are all available at the Heritage Reading Stairs. So if you actually want to sit and go through them, you're welcome to come see us. So the primary document, I guess the first one that I always start with, is the designating bylaw for the property. If it's an individually designated property, there will be a statement of significance that outlines why that property is of heritage value, what makes it important. If it's was passed after 2005, which was the last major change to the Heritage Act, it should have a list of heritage attributes, those tangible things that we look at that maintains and it really demonstrates the heritage value of the property. So those are the things that we're really concerned about, how they're changed and what the impacts to them are. If the property is also or is just included in a heritage conservation district under Part 5, as Alex mentioned, the district plans are a valuable tool. They are a publicly scrutinized document and council-approved document that includes policies and guidelines on how that community likes to see or wants to see their community evolved and how change is managed and how the conservation of those heritage components of that district are conserved. So they're a valuable tool that we reference pretty extensively. The official plan, as Greg mentioned, specifically Section 7, outlines a number of tools and policies related to heritage conservation for the city. In addition to those policy documents, we also use on masonry techniques and masonry best practices for heritage buildings in the city, as well as window restoration, window maintenance for buildings in the city as well. So those are documents that we reference, and a lot of the time we'll include as a condition of approval that the changes that they're doing to, say, windows are in conformity with those policies. So also something else we reference. From a federal level, the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada is an invaluable document put out by Parks Canada in 2010. Chapter 3 are what are called, quote, the standards, which all heritage conservation should endeavor to achieve and are respected as conservation best practices in Canada. The guidelines, which are Chapter 4 of this document, are divided into recommended guidance for buildings, archaeology, cultural landscapes, and the like, and are broken up by types of alterations. So they're a very handy tool as well. The information sheet put out by the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport, known as the 8 Guiding Principles for Conservation of Built Heritage Resources, is an information sheet that largely echoes those national standards, but in a more direct and specific way, and it's, again, a very handy starting point. And again, the Heritage Toolkit is a toolkit that, again, the ministry put out a number of years ago, and it's a real simple document on how to implement the tools under the Heritage Act, what the role of the Heritage Committee is, how the Heritage District, how you designate properties. So it's a handy tool as well. So this is just a quick example of the reports. You'll see a number of them in your agenda package today. Staff put together these reports. They include a description of the application, the reasons for the property designation, our analysis of the alteration, any previous approvals that the property has seen, and a summary of the comments we've seen through consultation, both committee and from internal agencies that we've circulated. And importantly, it also includes staff's recommendation on the outcome of the application and any conditions associated there too. So that brings me to this committee's role in what to do with those recommendations. Staff present our overview, like you'll see today, with the files, each file, including our recommendations. And while the method for this committee to submit their comments to staff remains the same through Dash, we will upload them into our reports, include them in our reports. The process by which to move forward with our recommendations varies depending on the type of designation. So under the Heritage Act, required, and I'll use that word, required, to consult with Heritage Kingston prior to rendering decisions on applications for alteration demolitions under Part 4 designated properties, so the individual designated properties. So in this case, we will present a recommendation to the group, and the group gets a chance to use that recommendation, approve it, deny it, defer it, make changes to it, and use that as a device to send comments to council. In terms of, contrary to that, in Part 4 designated properties, or Part 5, excuse me, contrary to that, in Part 5 designated properties, the Heritage defined a role for the Heritage Committee. So they are not required to consult for alterations to properties in a district. To make it even more, if you're demolishing in a district or removing a property or a building in a district, there is a role. So it reverts back to a similar process under the Part 4 properties. But for alterations, there's no defined role, the motion that's provided to you from staff is the motion that's going to council. So committee has an opportunity to provide their comments, to ask questions, to provide their comments in writing, and also to provide comments at the meeting. And those comments are provided to council, and they are option of either endorsing endorsing staff's recommendation or not endorsing staff's recommendation. So that's how that works. And again, the comments that are provided to staff also go directly to council. So just to quickly repeat that, I guess, the recommendation that comes from staff for Part 4 is handed to you to do what you wish with it, to pass it on to council. The motion that comes from staff on a Part 5 is what's going to council, and this committee gets a chance to endorse it or not to endorse it. So there'll be opportunity to understand this a little further and ask questions about this. So it should be noted, and just to actually make it even more complicated, if you have a property that has both a Part 4 and a Part 5 designation on it, which happened, the Part 5 process trumps it. So if it's in a district, the district plan is the one that we follow. So once all that is done and it's up to council, with a recommendation, the council will review it and make their decision. All decisions on council come out in form of a lovely pink permit slip that you see up there. Also, similarly, if it's a staff approval, this is the same form that comes out as their permit themselves. Heritage permits are good for 3 years. I should note quickly that in the event that council denies an application, or if they approve it and there's with conditions that the owner doesn't appreciate, the owner can appeal that decision to the local planning appeals tribunal or the court, as the case may be. I'll say that again. Only the owner can appeal a decision from council under the Heritage Act. And under the Heritage Act as well, council gets 90 days to make this decision. And if they don't make a decision within the 90 days of the application being deemed complete, then the Act states that it is deemed approved. So we have to ensure we follow those. I guess I'll take a quick question, if that's okay, Mr. Chair? Or should I wait to the end? This is the end of the statutory stuff, so if you want a quick question on that, I'm happy to help.
Jim?
Thank you. Still trying to get my head around Part 4 and Part 5. Is it accurate to say if you're in a Part 5 zone, all properties of being listed, and that heritage staff have considerations if somebody requests a planning application? I don't know if I made myself abundantly confused in that question.
Just for some clarification, I can add that in each of the district plans, first of all, every property boundary of a heritage conservation district is considered designated. They are subject to the Part 5 rules. In each of the district plans, each property is classified. So in Sydenham, for example, it's the most comprehensive one. They have 3 categories for classification. There's significant buildings, which are the highest valuable buildings from a heritage perspective in the district. They're the ones that contribute the most to the character of the district. Secondly, they call them contributing buildings, which are buildings that perhaps aren't old, aren't heritage necessarily, or have been changed pretty significantly, but because of their form or their placement, contribute in a certain way to the district and don't take away from it. And then finally, non-contributing buildings, which are those that are just really out of place. But any changes to the properties, any of them, requires approval under Part 5, or in the scheme of the approval processes and what's exempt and what's not exempt and those type of things. But decisions that are made for those changes are subject to that process, and if they need to go to council for approval, they will come through here in that same practice. So it'll be staff's recommendation that you have a chance to either endorse or not endorse. Did I answer your question? Did I confuse things?
Answers my first question. You mentioned with Part 5 that it comes, a recommendation before it goes to council, comes to this committee, but it's just binary code. We say yes or no to supporting it. Is there an opportunity, or do staff take into account if, I know we can't amend it, there's a suggestion that comes out of this committee, does that become a consideration under Part 5 for you to consider that?
You're crossing into procedure a little bit. I may have to defer to our clerk on some of it, but what I would say is if community members have suggestions when they're reviewing it, let us know ahead of time before we get to this, so that we can add those, if appropriate, add those into our recommendation before it ever gets done. So talk to us if you have concerns, and we'll try to accommodate it that way. I'm not sure the process of changing on the fly. Again, I'll ask the clerk to answer those.
So through you, Mr. Chair, as Mr. Leary mentioned a few minutes ago, the first opportunity for the committee members to provide comment is through Dash. So if a issue is flagged there, the report could be adjusted as it's being drafted. While during the meeting, there's a final comments section for all Part 5 files, so that's another opportunity for comments to be raised. In the rare occurrence where a significant item could be vacant, staff do have the opportunity to prepare a supplemental report which could address the issue at council. There's no opportunity to amend or defer, as you mentioned, at Heritage Kingston itself.
So it's best to do it in advance. And my final question regards city properties. What's the process, or how vigilant, if you will, are we on listing or designating our own properties? Something near and dear to my heart is the Memorial Centre, which every decade seems to be faced with some recommendation that would affect it as a property. Is that something that could be listed or designated?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair, the ownership of the property is not really what we focus on. We look at the cultural heritage value of it. So certainly Memorial Centre, Victoria Park, they've been flagged, we're working on. And when the time is right and we have things aligned, they will certainly be considered. So yeah, no, we're not ignoring city properties. Any changes to city properties follow the same process as anybody. So you will meet folks from our facilities group and our parks group when they make changes to some of our city-owned resources, because they too will come through this committee as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Newman, on the topic or new topic?
Same topic, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm essentially just going to echo what Mr. said. We have very good open lines of communication with our colleagues in other municipal departments. And so as it relates to the Memorial Centre, for example, Victoria Park, we're actively working even right now with Luke Falwell, who's the Director of Parks and Recreation, and his team on options for some of the city's assets, properties.
Councillor Doherty?
I might be asking the same question, I'm not sure. I'm just trying to imagine the process. So we have received a few emails with some properties that you suggested we look at and give feedback to. So those would be number four category properties, is that right? Like, so in the fives we don't look at because they go straight to council, or do we still give the feedback in the same kind of process? Like, what's the difference? Because you did say 5 trumps 4, and then I was thought, oh, does then a district, does that weaken the heritage designation or not? So that's the part I don't understand.
No, the process for events and reviewing, providing comments to us as the planner is the same. Doesn't matter if it's a part 4 or part 5. The difference comes when we're in this environment, in this meeting. As I mentioned, the Heritage Act has a role for the Heritage Committee for part 4, for alterations in a part 4 designation, but doesn't have a role for the part 5 designation. But given how much the city values its heritage resources and how much efforts we put into conserving its heritage resources, we've built a role for this committee for Part 5 as best we could, because the comments that we get from this group is invaluable. We encourage that dialogue. We want the comments, but we can't impose a process that doesn't have a legislative backing. So we built this role for you, and we want you to provide our comments. And as I said, once you get familiar with Dash, the way of uploading comments will be the same regardless of the designation type. So perhaps with that, I will pass it on to my colleagues in Cultural Services to talk about some of the non-statutory roles.
All right, everyone. Good morning. I'm just going to give everybody like 10 seconds if you want to stretch, because I feel like it's been a long road already, and we have some more to talk about. So please, 7th inning stretch if you would like. Oh, I seem to be prompting a bathroom break at the same time, perhaps. All right, I'm gonna continue, and as I think people can get drinks, the clerk can tell me if this is completely out of bounds, but I know we've been going on for some time, and we have some more time ahead of us. I am Jennifer Campbell. I'm the manager of cultural heritage, as Colin introduced earlier. And I'm going to talk about some of the non-statutory responsibilities that are assigned to this committee. These really speak to the advisory capacity of this committee and its responsibility to address things that we've heard mentioned already, some of which I'll talk in more detail too. But land use planning, for example, things like the North Kingstown Secondary Plan and input that might be received there. This committee also acts as the city's Museum Advisory Committee, a very important component of the work it does. It provides advice to city policy development and implementation, and it also in its mandate has a responsibility toward public education on topics of cultural heritage value interest in our city. So I'm going to talk a bit more about some of the work that my group does and speak about some of the intersections with the policy requirements as they speak to our group and my team. I'm going to start with a little bit on the Kingston Culture Plan, something that Colin's already referenced and that you'll hear again as we move forward together. The Kingston Culture Plan was put in place in order to sort of set a strategic course for the development support of cultural initiatives within the city of Kingston as part of that sort of official planning process and strategic planning that Paige and Colin were talking to earlier. The culture plan is really important for the mandate of this committee in that a lot of the work you're going to see is called for through its creation and tracked through it then. And this has to do a lot with how we're professionalizing, how we're approaching the developments and initiatives that we undertake. The idea of the culture plan is to create sort of that sustainable and authentic long-term vision of cultural vitality, as Colin mentioned. And it really represents and recognizes opportunities for connection between departmental processes within the City of Kingston, but also community groups, agencies, and others that you might hear about through the initiatives that we're working on and championing. This also is a mechanism through which we align to the city's strategic priorities as well. So when the City of Kingston establishes its strategic objectives through council, then this can speak in and align with some of the work we already have in process through the culture plan. Within the Cultural Services Department, and I think it's an important referencing piece for this committee, we sort of align ourselves to two core services. The first is heritage, and I'm the manager of that portfolio. And then the second is arts, and we have a manager of arts and sector development. And it's interesting if you think about how the advisory committees of council work in these domains, because the arts side of our portfolio really works under cultural development with the Arts Advisory Committee. And the heritage side of this portfolio works with Heritage Kingston. And so for those of you who may have seen or followed the processes of the Arts Advisory Committee, those are sort of the processes, if you will, that you will see us bringing agenda items forward under related to heritage in particular. So we divide ourselves, and what I'm going to talk a little bit to are the kinds of things you'll see coming forward or topical coming forward through my team and my group and through Colin and the work of our department more broadly. We think about our work in terms of asset management. It has been mentioned already, but a number of the heritage assets that we actually use as interpretive and programming spaces are also built heritage designated properties. And we take that very much to heart in the ways that we activate those spaces and places. And we see this as an opportunity of putting intangible experience within tangible, touchable built structures. So very important for the work that we do to be thinking about that. And that's through the programming that you see mentioned here. At Control, we also share with the Planning, Building, and Licensing Department support for and the operation and programming of the Heritage Resource Center. Ryan mentioned this center as a resource if you want to see some of the policy documents and touch them and read them. We also activate that space as a programming space within City Hall. We run programs out of it. We anchor City Hall tours out of it. We also increasingly host a lecture series where we welcome presentations, which we host often in Memorial Hall, on built and intangible heritage topics. So it is a shared responsibility, again, speaks to mandate and relationship of culture with planning, building, and licensing that Paige and Colin spoke to earlier. So moving on from there, I just wanted to comment on some of, well, I didn't go through the whole thing, but you'll get it all. Moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about some of those asset pieces. So, of course, Kingston City Hall, National Historic Site, centered in a Heritage Conservation District, also designated for its ongoing operation, programming, and use as a seat of government, but also as a community hub or resource. And so we're working within a National Historic Site to interpret this space, to preserve it, to ensure that it continues to preserve and protect its designated Part 4 characteristics. So there are interior designations for City Hall. So we will hear things if someone wanted to request, for example, to change the banister railings on the staircases in City Hall. Those are designated under a Part 4 designation. But we also think about how do we do sort of programmatic and experiential storytelling within this space and place. We also have the McLaughlin Woodworking Museum on the sort of eastern edge in what was Pittsburgh Township, but after amalgamation, the museum became a city-held asset. And it is a museum that we continue to use more often as a programming space and as an experiential, sort of hands-on history kind of relationship. People come and have experiences in this space. It also has a log cabin, which was relocated and is undesignated, but as a piece of interesting built heritage, though undesignated because it's not in its original location and there have been changes, a pretty interesting object in its own right. We also have the Pump House Museum, which is sort of on the edge of the Sydenham Heritage District, though not a part of it officially. It is a designated property. It is designated as the city's first pump house and for its Victorian architectural elements. So again, when we program this space, we're constantly thinking about the history it represents through its building and through its intent and its ongoing relationship with the city today as a museum and as a programmatic experience. Some of the other things that you're going to hear being talked about related to the work that we do is about public art. So this might seem something, and it is something that sort of in the development and delivery and creation of public sort of falls into that arts portfolio. But once public art is created in an enduring and intended enduring way in this city, it becomes part of the civic collection. So anytime the city commissions a piece of public art, if the intention is for that to be a permanent work, it becomes part of the civic collection, which becomes Heritage's responsibility for the ongoing care and maintenance of that work. This is also something that feeds into a lot of the work that we're doing with planning when we're thinking about ways that we can interpret maybe experiential landscapes or histories that are no longer spoken to through the built environment, but still need to be reflected on. So North Kingstown Secondary Plan, again, being referenced here, there's opportunities to call for perhaps the creation of public art, which will help to tell some of the stories that are important to that area, even if there aren't buildings necessarily that speak to those stories. So we're always working to think about how we can bring these pieces together. Another piece of work that we do is to work on expanded programming and community engagement initiatives that have to do with cultural heritage, particularly those things that are more experiential, that live in the people and the people who relate to these initiatives. So our team often works with community groups and organizations to think about how we program spaces. And that can be within built heritage, but it can also be the things that happen on our streets. You know, the arts, things like you see at the bottom here, which is National Indigenous Peoples Day. These are initiatives that are incredibly important in the cultural vitality of Kingston. And we try to work to support, and this is to act as an advisory body on these talks and on these initiatives. Also of note is our relationship with the Kingston Association of Museums, Art Galleries, and Historic Sites. On the art side of things, we have the Kingston Arts Council as a comparative body. So CAM is responsible for it manages and oversees and supports the relationships of museums, art galleries, and historic sites within the community. And we work with them through an SLA. And in the future, one of the things that this group will see, you will have an opportunity to see the SLA that has been crafted with CAM as a community member group, and also to see the work that they're doing through that SLA and be able to advise staff or make recommendations or suggestions, if you will. Recommendations is too formal. Make suggestions about things that we might want to pursue in that relationship and be able to support that document and its development through this. CAM also oversees the administration of the City of Kingston Heritage Fund, something else that is within this group's mandate to speak to the administrative plan for that fund in any given year. Again, every year we bring to council an administration plan that CAM has approval, and we are working into the process to suit the mandate of this committee, an opportunity then to think about what that administration plan, how it is outlined, the juried processes that are outlined within it, and the mechanisms by which the fund would then be administered. So working with CAM is an important thing, and familiarity with CAM is part of the mandate of this committee. Moving on from there, I want to speak to the Consolidated Civic Collections and Museums Policies, Municipal Museums Policies. This was provided to you in that orientation package, where I think we're talking somewhere in the 700 to 800 pages of orientation materials. So that was provided to you through a Dropbox link and an email. And when things come up over the next little while, we will try to preface them with some of the backgrounding information that you might have needed to take away from that document. But if you do have questions, you can always reach out to us and ask us questions about these documents and about what you're being asked to give advice or input into before you see it here. The museum's policies are sort of brought together into this consolidated document, and they're brought together in attendance to the requirements of the Community Museum Operating Guidelines that are established by the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport for the province of Ontario. So our museums receive what we call CMOG funding by their abbreviation, and in order to qualify for CMOG funding, you have to speak to those guidelines and ensure that you attend to all of the guidelines for the operation of community museums, which includes having a board, and council is technically the board of museums, but through the mandate of this committee was assigned the opportunity to speak to council with recommendations to oversee and relate to the operations of these museums in attendance to these guidelines. So when we bring forward, I will talk a little bit more in a moment, about when I bring forward a museum's report at the year end and speak about the initiatives that have occurred over the last year and foreshadow or foreground the initiatives to come, that's not simply an update, that is actually a requirement of museum operations in Ontario, and this is tasked with the responsibility of receiving that information on behalf of council so that council can fulfill its job as being the board. So there is a policy statement within these documents that kind of speaks to the role of our museums and that we will explore, interpret, disseminate, and generate awareness of local heritage to residents and visitors through public programs, exhibitions, tours, and special events. So I'm going to talk a little bit more now about what that museum's report can look like, and I'm going to show you some of the examples that came out of last year's 2017 update that came to this committee. You will see a committee report like this coming forward over the next several months, which will summarize the activities of the museums in 2018. So within 2019, we will report on the outcomes of 18, foreshadow the work to be done at the whole of 2019, and then again in 2020, we will do the same. So consistently looping back. I also should have pointed out a bit earlier, because you're gonna say, well, my goodness, she's talking a lot. One of the things that you're not seeing today is like the sort of group of heritage planners to my right. I also have a large group of individuals who work on these portfolios with me. So I just wanted to point out that though you're hearing this all from me, I actually am here to represent 10 full-time staff in the heritage portfolio, which balloons to 25 in the summers when we make our summer student and support staff hires. So I don't actually do all of these things by myself, certainly, but I'm often the one that will be here to share them with you. So the year-end report, just very quickly, what we'll try to capture in this document are, we set targets at the commencement of every year for the museums, and we'll foreground those targets for the next year. And then we report back on our achievement against those targets, as well as highlighting some of the real successes and perhaps some of the challenges that we faced over the previous year. So, this is 2017's numbers, and it's actually an interesting thing. Some of you have seen this, well, a couple of you have seen this in the previous formation of this committee. But I think it's helpful because knowing what this looks like will help you understand the document you're going to see in probably 2 to 3 months' time and have that ability to reference. So high level, in 2017, we welcomed about 30,000 people through the Pump House, the McLaughlin, and City Hall's National Historic Site. So we had 30,000 people through our sites, which comparatively to other museums in Kingston, is not an insignificant number, certainly. Largely in what we would call the tourist season, so April through the end of September, the timelines when things are particularly busy and or hot for us. We welcome visitors from all over the world, not unsurprising. We get a number of individuals coming to City Hall, representing a whole spectrum from countries, represented just here in this map. We are constantly adapting and tailoring our programming and things where insight and advice is always welcome about ways that people could experience this space better or have a more complete experience when you bring guests or visitors here with you. We offer right now, our tour brochure is available in English, French, German, Spanish, and Mandarin. We base that decision on the attendance numbers coming from various countries, and that's an area where we're constantly thinking through and kind of updating the experience and the plan. Another of the things we speak to in our report is the status of the civic collection. This is something you will also see brought forward through reports of the Heritage Assets Working Group, often around recommendations to accession and or de-accession objects from our collection, kind of like designating or de-designating, as I think it was called earlier. So we have almost objects in the City of Kingston Civic Collection, and we have opportunity to add more as we see that it is necessary to continue to ensure we can conserve and preserve and share with our community the history that we have together. We also have to think critically through museum standards and practices about what's the best strategy regarding the ongoing care and maintenance. Do we need to have all these objects? Can we reduce the collection? It's a challenge museums are facing globally, and one that we're certainly not immune to. So in this report, you will see us kind of bring forward the sort of summation of the previous year's work with the civic collection. And through the Heritage Assets reports, you will have opportunity to accept recommendations of staff through that working group to bring to council recommendations to take in new objects or de-accession to remove objects. The example given here is just McLean. He's downstairs next to the concierge desk as you come into City Hall on the right-hand side. Have a look at him if you've never looked at him before. Big piece of conservation work that was undertaken in 2017. You can see a beautiful sunset that was revealed through conservation of that piece of art. All right. Again, we are thinking about the civic artifact collection at the top, some sort of bullet points about the things that were accomplished in 17. We're also museum ticket sales and revenue growth, the funding sources that we're able to get, and visitor experience. I'm going to move through these fairly quickly. I apologize. I won't be able to take all the bullets in, but they're in your package. We're also thinking about demographics. One of the mandates of this committee and one of the mandates of my team is to think about how we foster audience development and bring stories to people who might not otherwise be taking them in, but also how we speak to the tourism that is such an important economic driver within the City of Kingston. So who's coming to our sites? From where do they come? How are we tailoring programming? What are ideas, suggestions about new ways to activate our spaces is certainly well within the purview of this committee to propose or offer advice toward. We're constantly thinking about our rankings, if you will, in Kingston's sort of TripAdvisor situation. City Hall is number 4 right now if you want to look for a historic site to visit within the City of Kingston. This is number 11, and the McLaughlin is number 17. And these are actually, those are powerful places within this hierarchy, but we also recognize the requirements of the committee as well as our group to support the work of other museums. Again, coming back to CAM. Right? So how do we support CAM and those member groups as well? Whew, really dense slide here. But I think some of ones that are of a particular interest to this committee, we had 500 people in 2017 attend Heritage Resource Center lectures. Again, the Heritage and its ongoing programming is part of the listed mandated responsibility of this committee. It is listed specifically, and its ongoing activation as programming is part of your mandate to be thinking through and speaking into. The others are more specific to the city museums, so I won't discuss them too long, but really, again, trying to track our engagement, find new ways for us to collectively educate the community about the work that we're doing. To accessibility, both economic, physical, or other potential barriers that exist within our spaces and within the city more broadly. So here is an accessibility snapshot about those museums, but another capacity of this to make suggestions or recommendations about mechanisms through which to make accessible experiences for heritage experiences within the City of Kingston. So certainly the pump house had a significant renovation, which again was an alteration to a designated property as being required for municipal accessibility obligation and desire. So we created accessible washrooms, created a new entrance point, which you can see down in that architectural rendering about how that space was added onto a heritage building. So, certainly again, that intersection of what is it to occupy, activate, and make accessible the ways that we continue to use built heritage as a tool, if you will, in how we can share and educate our community about placemaking and shared experiences. Just a little bit more of that renovation represented here. We also do website design and updates, something else that we use to address accessibilities. And talking about next season's shows is something that will happen in a document at any given time. And just by way of a bit of a foregrounder, I guess, we will be offering a show at the Pump House this summer, starting the beginning of April, which will be on labor histories. And most specifically the history of Ontario Street, on which the pump house is located. So we will be looking at the development of Ontario Street since its actual street, which is going to involve some consideration of how it has developed in terms of its built infrastructure, as well as the ways that it has been used. I believe right now the working titles is Brewers, Bakers, and Boilermakers. So it's really, again, another opportunity. We tell our stories and how those relate to built heritage initiatives. And again, this committee has opportunity to offer input, feedback, insights into the things that we are working on. And then finally, just on this museums piece, we have the Woodworking Museum, as I mentioned before, with its historic log cabin, which has moved increasingly to an experiential model of museum programming. We invite people there to do hands-on history. This is an opportunity to use traditional tools and techniques to produce woodworking objects. We have open workshop experiences as well as programming experiences. So charcuterie boards was a very popular one over the last season. You will hear more about that in future presentations, but this is not charcuterie boards with electric planers and things like that. This is all labor of hand. And so we're really hoping to share with people through those experiences what the value is and those commitments to making in a space like Kingston where makers are such an important part of our community. Another of the policy documents, so stepping outside now of that consolidated museum policy collective, another of the important policy documents that this committee will see reports on, and we've proposed quarterly updates to the commemoration strategy, is the City of Kingston commemoration strategy. In 2015, this strategy was established and followed then by a policy document, which basically allows for some guiding principles and outlines about how do we engage in new commemorations within the city. There's an internal working group that receives applications for new commemorations, and they consider them against the outlines of that policy and the expectations or strategies proposed in that outline. And so they're essentially to understand and prioritize requests for new commemoration against what is needed in our commemorative framework versus what is already incredibly well represented. So if someone were to come forward and say, we would like perhaps, just by way of example, a commemoration within the city, the internal working group would consider that initially and judge it against the policy outlines and the strategy document. And it would see that in there is noted that military is one of the well-represented commemorative acts in town. And so the initial recommendation or discussion would be about how does it differ, what does it add, how do we frame it in a landscape where we have noted there are other areas where priority commemoration perhaps should take place first. So we would use this document then to work with a community partner, think about what commemorative acts might be undertaken, how they would be best supportive, and how they speak to that inclusive history that we're continuing to work to build, et cetera. All right, the last major piece you're going to hear about today, outside of the report that I'll be presenting that is coming in the agenda today, is the Engage for Change project that Colin mentioned. Part of the work that this committee does is to help staff in its development, particularly of public engagement, which is designed to feed into strategic or policy development processes. So we are consulting with our community, and this group is often identified as a stakeholder or at least an advisory committee to helping those engagement processes move forward. Engage for Change is a project that we've been working on over the last several years. It's into its second phase, and I'm not going to capture all of its first phase here. But this is really about work with the Indigenous community in Kingston. And into its second phase, it involves a significant amount of community support, as well as engagement and facilitated engagement with Indigenous community members to think about the things that we need to be moving forward into policy protocol and standard operating procedure, if you will. So we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee. There are approximately 7,000 urban Indigenous community members within relation today. We have regional connections as an Indigenous hub in that we have fly-in from northern communities into Kingston, particularly to access healthcare resources. How do we best support those individuals, not only in their health needs, but also in their cultural and traditional needs, and while they're here as members of our Indigenous community. Clearly, we have Kandanega, we have connections to Alderville First Nation and the Mississauga, who are the first caretakers and traditional caretakers of this land. And so we are also increasingly looking at relationships with other First Nation, nation-to-nation conversations as initiatives develop. We have accords, essentially, or official relationships with communities that have historic relationship to this land. The Mohawk Nation Council of Chiefs, as I've said, the Alderville First Nation, the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte, the Métis Nation of Ontario and the Highland Waters, and the Huron-Wendat Nation at Wendake. So these are relations that are sort of what we would consider those nation to nation. They're more legislated in our relationships to them, but also important relationships in recognizing caretaker and stewardship for this territory as a traditional space. Work with the Indigenous community has led to the development of the recognition statement approved in June 2nd of 2015 by Council to be read at the commencement of City Council meetings, which recognizes and honors that we are on traditional land and that we have an ongoing relationship to and with the Indigenous community that find themselves in Kingston today. This has also led to council support for the TRC through the 94 calls to action, but also through what was called first the Purposeful Dialogues Report, which was a community engagement findings report, which directed the city to pay attention perhaps to some areas where we could be doing work and incorporate our local population, the Indigenous population, into municipal processes, policies. All of this led to Engage for Change. It has 3 phases. The first phase was undertaken in 2016. It was really about non-Indigenous community education initiatives. There were a series of talking circles. You may have participated in one, where we reached out to the community and tried to create a shared common space where people could learn more about Indigenous history. There was also increased Indigenous programming and event support. Right now we're in phase 2 of Engage for Change, which continues to be about community education and continued programming support, but the fundamental objective of this phase is about Indigenous community consultation, about moving forward some of the priority areas of need that addressed through a number of engagement exercises over the last 5 years. We're already predicting that this will move into phase 3. At its summation, phase 2 runs 2018-19. Phase 3 is expected to be 2020-2021. And we expect phase 3 will actually lead to a protocol development, as well as the integration of phase 1 non-Indigenous community work with phase 2 Indigenous-led community consultation and recommendations into some shared and sustainable outcomes for programming and event support. So this is the things you'll see with your non-statutory responsibilities and the information we bring to you, is that at times it may seem like, well, we've heard this again or we've done this in the past, but these are long-term processes. These are long-term processes that require multiple touch points with this committee and other stakeholder committees. This is how we work with the community to ensure that the work that we've been tasked to do by council or by the culture plan is going to align and best represent the community voice and the experience. And that's really the mandate of this committee here, is for you as one of the invested stakeholders and consultation bodies to represent a voice and input mechanism into these processes. So I don't bring these these reports to simply say to you, this is what we're doing, and you don't have opportunity to comment. Bring them forward, desiring comment, desiring input, or desiring direction that could be referred back to a working group if a working group is working on any of these initiatives. So very quickly then, what's happening with E4C to the things that you're going to see as a committee right now, 2018-19? We have $40,000 that was approved by council as part of a package, a suite of funding for the Engage for Change second phase, which is being used to support community programming of National Indigenous Peoples Day, 2018 and 2019, it would be in there. World Indigenous Peoples Day. We supported powwow attendance in Tyendinaga for community members who were wanting to go. We sent people to Sisters in Spirit. We had Cataraqui Indigenous Wellness Day, and we continue to work with partners to continue to flesh out these relationships and these support models for the 19. We also had $20,000 that was earmarked for ongoing community education. This was an opportunity for community groups to come forward and say, I'd like to have a talking circle similar to what was arranged in phase 1, with a more hands-off approach from the city. Instead of us organizing the talking circle, choosing the facilitation team, and sort of mandating how the day would run, instead now we've provided guidelines. We offer $2,000 grants to community partners, and they are then responsible for working with an Indigenous facilitation team to deliver a community experience that allows for education to be shared, speaking to the high-level directives of sharing information about residential schooling, the directions of the TRC, as well as the Indigenous history of Kingston. But provided they check those boxes, we allow community groups to take this on for themselves. There is still funding available in this category, so we're continuously working to find new partnerships and to speak to new communities and educate them appropriately. We also have some internal initiatives and alignments that are happening in 18-19. Interdepartmental Indigenous Working Group is one. Smudge policy, which is a policy that was worked on with the city but never actually came to council for approval, is one that is under review as well. The development of resources websites, e-learning for city staff, as well as cultural awareness training are initiatives that are being undertaken. The big piece that we're working on, as I've said, is a facilitated engagement with the Indigenous community in Kingston. And we have brought on First Peoples Group, which is an Indigenous-led facilitation and engagement team. They worked not only on Indigenous-led programs or on topics of reconciliation, but they have also worked with the Ministry of Culture, Tourism, Sport, Public Health. They've worked across the nation with different groups on various initiatives. So they're an engagement team, but they're also very trained in Indigenous facilitation and conflict resolution. They also notably were the advisors on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. And so they have agreed to join us in Kingston for this facilitation exercise. And they are helping us work with the community to identify actionable next steps towards the creation of a community council or advisory committee. It's not really sure what that's going to look like yet, but very important for this community as it moves forward. And also exploring what are the actionable next steps towards the creation of a cultural gathering space. And that's not that the city would be responsible for that gathering space, but that it is a priority need of the Indigenous community and is clearly very important to the cultural vitality of our sector, particularly as it speaks to the Indigenous histories of Kingston. Another initiative you're going to hear me talk about, and you've heard me talk for long enough as it is, when another report comes forward, so I won't belabor it here, and it does engage for change on the concept of Without Us, and that is the Your Stories, Our Histories engagement program. So we are working right now on a different initiative, also using the same facilitation team, in fact, to explore how do we build an inclusive history of Kingston to develop a cultural heritage strategy. So all of that being said, I think technically supposed to be turning this over to Greg. Although I'm happy to take it out, it's 2 slides. Greg's like, do it.
Thanks, Jen. I'll be very brief. So, snapshot in the report that you have to support the orientation, we just had a list of some of the priority projects that we're working on that we think at some point will come to this committee for input and discussion, or it may end up going to one of the working groups. So we have an agreement with Queen's University to help conserve a number of the properties under their ownership. So we actually have a heritage easement agreement that sets out a process for making alterations to properties owned by Queens. So we've graciously gotten a 1-year extension to that agreement because it expired a few months ago. We're trying to reformat the structure of the agreement so that it establishes a more streamlined process for very minor alterations and a more rigorous process for more substantive alterations. We continue to work on advancement of designation of new properties. Archaeological Research Associates did years ago on identifying the extent to which about 150 properties satisfied the criteria for designation. And out of that, we listed about 111 properties, and now we're trying to designate many of those properties that we've listed. It's been mentioned a few times this morning, the North Kingstown Secondary Plan. So we will bring different iterations of this work forward, either to the committee or to one of the working groups so that you can feed in specifically to the Cultural Heritage Plan. That is a fairly major component of that work. We have Central Kingston Growth Strategy. So largely the former city of Kingston is being captured by this study with the exception of North Kingstown, which is going through a separate study. So we'll look at cultural heritage components that we may wish to bring to this. We have, just last year, we updated the Heritage Grant bylaw, and right now we're looking at the Heritage Property Tax Refund bylaw and a reworking of the program to make sure that it's effectively offering funding opportunities to the owners of heritage properties. I don't know if you want to speak to the other ones.
I mean, I can. Yeah, and I guess City Hall Market Wing redevelopment is an initiative that was begun with the Cultural Heritage Working Group last year. The first floor level of City Hall in the Market Wing, which is behind the HRC, is being redeveloped to allow for an expanded HRC alongside of increased exhibition and programming spaces. And so that work has already started with the Cultural Heritage Working Group. But again, thinking about how do we sympathetically expand that programmatics in the context of a National Historic Site and a Heritage District to facilitate increased programming. Engage for Change, which I've already spoken about, remains and will remain a topic at this committee for consultation and input. Your Stories Are Histories, which I'll be presenting later, is another of those major engagement exercises, again, to feed the creation of a cultural heritage strategy. It's also been priority work of the Cultural King group, so you'll see this information coming forward through the notes of that group, as well as through presentations when input is needed to the committee. We also have, as I've mentioned, the museum's annual report. The SIT collection has a management plan right now that is being updated and amended, and the target is to bring that forward through the Heritage Assets Working Group this year. So consultation with that work will begin as we think about what does that plan need to look like. Again, this is a requirement of the Community Museums Office that we have an updated management plan that speaks to the content of our collection and its ongoing care. We also have a council recommendation to bring forward consideration of what a civic recognition program could look like for the City of Kingston. Again, this is being discussed at the Cultural Heritage Working Group, but we'll come to this committee for consultation and input as well. And then the Heritage Fund, which CAM, again, administers and oversees, but an opportunity to speak in. We're reviewing the funds, both the Heritage Fund and the Arts Fund for the City of Kingston over the next 6 months. And what the outcomes of those processes will be will certainly be brought forward to this committee again for consideration, consultation, and input. And that speaks to the fund review as well, listed at the bottom. This is really in a snapshot, thinking about outside again of those statutory requirements that are on this committee's sort of agenda in the long-term, kind of year-long perspective. These are things that you can expect to see being brought forward through your agenda for consultation, input, and feedback through the committee, in addition to the statutory things that will come forward kind of procedurally month after month, those recommendations and reports from the heritage team in particular. So we have questions and comments.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to suggest that if you've got questions, you think about them and probably keep them until next month, because Jennifer will be here each month. I think it's probably time for a break. Those City Hall, the washrooms are downstairs, so it takes a 10-minute break, and if we can reconvene about 25 to 12. Okay. Okay, thank you for all being good on time there. So we continue on to 9A1, community engagement events, your stories, our histories.
Thank you. I'm here to introduce the report and give you some opportunity for input regarding the initiatives that will be outlined and were outlined in the report, but are also to come over the course of the next several months related to the Your Stories, Our Histories project. I had a bit of a conversation with the chair about how exactly to receive comments on this item, given the weight of the agenda today and the amount of time that has passed. And I am certainly open to receiving additional input through email if you would like time to formulate your thoughts on this. But I would welcome the opportunity if you're interested in having a conversation today, as we're able within the agenda as it is. The Your Stories, Our Histories project is a community conversation to build an inclusive history of Kingston. And this comes out of the work of course, some strategic planning and directional documents, which we've already referenced today. The Kingston Culture Plan certainly identifies within its sort of outline that Kingston's most compelling cultural asset is its powerful historical narrative. And one of the challenges then we face is ensuring that we're telling an inclusive and not just selecting specific components of that narrative to emphasize and tell. It is the enduring challenge of what we do. How do we tell an inclusive history? We also look to the Integrated Cultural Heritage and Cultural Tourism Strategy, which is shared in your orientation package, as another of those influencing and guiding calls for an inclusive and strategic telling of Kingston's stories in a landscape that will support the economic growth and underpinning of a cultural tourism model. We also have the Kingston Commemoration Strategy, which I mentioned earlier, speaks to gap commemorative processes and areas or thematic areas where in future we would like to bring commemorative emphasis. So thinking about that as well as part of framing out what cultural heritage strategy begin to look like, which will direct the ways that we program exhibitions, community events, et cetera, within the city of Kingston. The final document then is the Civic Museum's year-end reports. As an example, that we make exhibition plans currently, thinking about the culture plan, the integrated cultural heritage, cultural tourism strategy, as well as the commemoration thematic gaps. What we're craving now and what has been called for through these strategic and planning documents is the creation of a comprehensive cultural heritage strategy, one that outlines strategically where we're going to fill gaps, how we're going to tell inclusive histories, and whose stories perhaps we need to tell, contextualize, retell, emphasize, or perhaps allow to continue they have because they are well represented already in the suite of programming and experiences within the city of Kingston. So that began, this initiative sort of leads to this engagement exercise, which is ongoing, called Your Stories, Our Histories. This is an opportunity for the Kingston to feed into the development of that cultural heritage strategy document, which will then be used to help develop future programming, exhibits, events, and educational offerings. Here at Kingston City Hall, this initially began in response to the need for a strategic exhibition and programming plan for the Market Wing redevelopment project, and grew over included into this broader heritage strategy that could be deployed at City Hall or across other city assets. And this doc shared more broadly with the community, not as a mandate, but as an opportunity to share the gathered information because other sector members and colleagues might be able to find gaps here that they specifically at their programs could assist in addressing. It's a guiding document for our work within the city, but also a shared guiding document with other members of the community who might see benefit and how they could help it in their own planning processes. It's important to reference here the relationship that in this project to the ongoing conversation around Sir John A. Macdonald and his position within the city of Kingston. And we saw this as an opportunity if we're going to explore with the community, how do we tell history, what stories do we tell, and how do we share them? Where are we needing perhaps to update or contextualize? What should we do to really ensure that we're telling the broadest, most inclusive history possible? And given the timeline within which this project was initiated and the conversations that we saw arising both locally and nationally around Sir John A. Macdonald, we had to, how does he and his legacy and the stories that we share about that history, but also about the ongoing relationship with his period, resonate with us today, particularly within the context of the city of Kingston. So we recognized that this was a necessary conversation and one that needed to happen within the Kingston community, relevant to the Kingston experience in particular, and not just looking to national guidance for how we ought to respond, really thinking about as a grassroots, what does Kingston need for Kingston's own telling of an inclusive and diverse history, and one that captures the community relationship in the past, but also moving forward. This led to an installation at City Hall. Downstairs in the Sir John A. Macdonald room, there is now an installation which invites citizens and visitors alike to read, share, and participate, so they can read some of the contextualizing information. Some of the ongoing conversations that we see happening in the community are reflected in that installation, and we invite community members then to feed back into that conversation. You can leave a comment card downstairs in City Hall to Sir John A. Macdonald, or you can join us and continue to participate in the engagement activities that we're trying to frame out right now for 20. So I just wanted to share some of the information that's been coming out of these initiatives, and please don't take this as the wholesale complete package of the engagement thus far. It is not. This is an ongoing process. But City Hall, through those feedback cards, that project launched at the beginning of September, and it was really the tail end of our high tourist season. And we've received 70 feedback cards in that process thus far. We've had opportunity now to essentially code them, if you're familiar with kind of sociocultural methods of taking data and assigning it. They've been high-level coded right now, and we're doing a deeper dive as we move forward. But I just wanted to bring this forward because to date, the majority of feedback or comment cards we've received recognize the history of Sir John A. Macdonald and calls for some contextualizing or unpacking or accessory programming, exhibitions, or interpretation. The question was not remove or keep a statue, but of course we got responses like that. There was one comment card right now out of 70 that said take a statue down. But the majority actually called for contextualizing. Other is actually capturing a whole swath of things that are actually completely unrelated to this project, or feedback or comments about City Hall as a National Historic Site, so some good input there, but perhaps not so relevant to the directed question. So we will be looking at those as kind of an accessory piece to this. And again, this is an ongoing opportunity for feedback to be, so I don't mean to suggest that this by any way is done or dusted, or that this is a deep dive on the feedback received through this engagement exercise. The other engagement exercise that was begun and continues and leads into the work we're trying to accomplish in 2019 was the launching on the online Get Involved Kingston platform of the same project initiative. So again, calling the community to share stories, emphasize components of history, and draw attention to things that we could tell or be telling better. Again, not unsurprisingly, in the moment when this launched in September of 2018, the conversation turned immediately to Sir John A. Macdonald, and initially much of the feedback that we saw through this was about that conversation piece. We also, though, have started to see feedback about adjacent stories, histories, other tellings that need to be shared in the city of Kingston. And we're now working to think about how do we transition the project to more fully address its mandate, which is about how do we tell inclusive history and what mechanisms can we use to get the community to participate in helping frame those. If you go onto the Your Stories, Our Histories Get Involved Kingston website, you see a project timeline. In spring of 2018, if you were on this committee or if you've seen through the working notes of the working groups, that we were having these conversations at Cultural Heritage Working Group about what does this engagement look like, how do we plan it out, how do we assess involvement, et cetera. Again, working together to think about how this committee can help to inform the work of the working group, which is meant to support the work of the mandate of this committee, and then also support the work that we're trying to accomplish with the community under a public engagement and programming mandate. We moved into fall-winter, which was the community input and story gathering phase, and now we're trying to frame up for the winter-spring public engagement events. So I just wanted to talk a little more about the Cultural Heritage Working Group. We worked with the working group. We were talking about the City Hall Market Wing redevelopment, which grew into a broader conversation about a cultural heritage strategy. We talked and reviewed, defined the level of engagement, which is identified to be involve, which is a mid-level public engagement, one that we often see in city engagement exercises, an opportunity to have a back and forth dialogue with the community as opposed to just sharing information and doing something that's a bit more collaborative. We also talked about a preliminary list of stakeholders and have drafted such a list, which I won't share today, but you're certainly welcome to join us at Working Group if you'd like to see any of the fine details of these engagement pieces. And we also developed a preliminary list of themes based on past work in the community. This wasn't to dictate conversation, but to anticipate areas where in the past we saw that attention was called for, and think about where we might have gaps that need to be addressed in future planning. The online initiative then initially called simply for the submission of stories, suggestions, reflections on what we could add to a cultural heritage thematic list or a series of stories. To date, we've had 2,000 plus visitors to the site. Told through our communications team is actually a pretty strong engagement. And we've had what we call 57 engaged visitors. This means individuals who took the time to leave a story. And these are not short stories. These are oftentimes almost short or newspaper articles. They are long, they're oftentimes researched, even though uncited. There are a weighty amount of things to work. Certainly where we are right now is thinking about the content of those submissions and how we can use them moving forward. We're also at this time thinking about how do we use the engagement tools online as a mechanism to grow the engagement outside of just a conversation on Sir John A. Macdonald, complete picture of stories and histories that need to be told. So the arrow on this, the tool we've been using in that online engagement, again, it's called Stories. You simply submit a story. There's no opportunity for a back and forth dialogue on the story. You simply submit, and others can receive that submission, and we can take it in as a suggestion or a piece of advice. What we're exploring right now are two other tools called Places and Ideas, and these are hopefully going to help us start to think about how we gather more community input, which isn't just about John A. Macdonald, but about those stories that we really want to capture and those themes that we want to move forward with. So just looking at those quickly, we're hoping to launch these soon. The idea here is that we would use the Places tool, which is simply the map of the city of Kingston, and to put a pin on the map, and to then associate stories or feedback with that pin. So it's a geographic sort of framing of history and narrative and story making and place making. So people might be able to identify an area where they think a performance could happen or a program could happen or a space that historically used to do something else that it doesn't do today, but people want to see that accounted for in a collective experience. The other right now is Ideas, which are essentially virtual Post-it notes. This is where individuals will have an opportunity to post an idea, be it a theme or a story they would like to see told, and then other visitors to the site essentially can vote up or down that idea by liking or not liking it. And so again, one tactic to start to see areas where we might have a lot of community commitment in a specific direction. The other thing then we're working on right now is working to confirm what the facilitated engagement events will be in 2019 and to refine the timeline. I mentioned that we hired First Peoples Group to help with the engagement for Engage for Change, and First Peoples Group has also agreed to help support the facilitated engagement. So it's important to note there's two levels of engagement that kind of streams that are working together here. There will be facilitated with an action team conversations, which are identified as public talks and or workshops. And then there are those ongoing event-driven or online-driven engagement tactics where we're going to get feedback, but it's not necessarily going to be kind of as a collective in a shared space working through and talking about things. The timeline here is not off entirely. It is sort of on the high level correct, but we're starting to nail it down. And importantly, it needs to be connected to engagement events of Engage for Change because there is overlap in some of these pieces. And we want to ensure that we're aligning in a way that allows the community to offer feedback and the stakeholder groups, including this committee, to offer feedback when and where they can. So we're working right now to think through about what are those first public engagement events led by the facilitation team. What do they look like? And that's where we're welcoming, particularly from this committee today. So the first public engagement event, which is targeted to happen sometime in Q1, so before the end of March, we're looking for basically a public talk. It won't be called that. It'll be something perhaps a bit more engaging sounding about why stories matter. We see the need to engage the public to think about the various ways that people engage with history and stories as a mechanism then to generate sharing of stories. right? So many people will say, I don't have a story that's important, but if we frame for them how every story actually has a place to inform something, then it will better inform the community about how they can actually see themselves reflected in the work that we're trying to accomplish here. We're looking for interesting ideas about venue and time of day or other directives around what a public talk experience might look like. Traditionally, public talks have happened in Memorial Hall. They often happen in the afternoons. We've heard feedback about the challenges therein, about community engagement and who you're able to get out to such an event. So very interested in feedback or direction regarding venues and time in particular. The second public engagement talking event is Monuments, Museums, and History. And this is a precursor to a workshop specifically to address or to discuss Sir John A. Macdonald. And the attempt here is to first begin, again, with a public conversation about why monuments, museums, and history and how they situate themselves in any city's relationship to historical figures, positive, negative, or other, and to then use that as a guide into what will be, at times perhaps, a charged conversation about our ongoing relationship, Sir John A. Macdonald, but as we've already seen through feedback, one that seems to already be calling for at least a more collective history of what the role of certain individuals were in our histories. We're also looking at community events for outreach, and it's another area where I would welcome input or suggestions. Many of you are involved in various community initiatives, and we're looking to find community events where we could do something more akin to kind of tabling, if you will, an opportunity to bring on tablet some of those feedback mechanisms, to talk with people about upcoming engagement exercises and how they might get involved, and to really get the word out about the kinds of stories we're trying to gather and what the initiative is meant to address. We've already partnered with Reel Out Queer Film Festival. They've allowed us to partner on their opening night event, which is now going to be termed Queer Stories, Queer Histories. And we are helping to sponsor a film at that festival. And the idea, again, is to think about community members who perhaps captured in the thematic histories that have been told within Kingston. We're also in conversation with the Kingston Canadian Film Festival in a similar way. And the other groups that are listed here are really just under consideration. I don't want to represent that we have solidified a partnership or relationship with each of these. But again, really looking for input, suggestions, ideas about how to share the program to get people involved, or to think about how we might move conversations forward so that we broaden the community that's participating. So that's it in a nutshell. The opportunity is really for the committee to think about how you can help to inform this, how you might share it with your community groups or constituents, and offer suggestions, comments, input, feedback that I can take either to the Cultural Heritage Working Group or incorporate into our planning with our facilitation team. As I mentioned earlier, the chair did ask about the possibility of receiving suggestions and comments via email. I'm certainly welcome to receiving email at any time with input regarding any of the initiatives we're working on. I would just caveat that with, please, if you do intend to offer feedback through email, please do so, because I know when you walk away from committee, it can be difficult to get back into the headspace. So if there are comments or questions, I'm happy to take them now. Thanks.
Comments, questions, thoughts? Anybody?
And I would comment on that comment. We've been talking with the Director of Planning over the course of last year about mechanisms to incorporate DASH as a possible way of presenting some of the cultural heritage reports and offering an opportunity for pre-meeting feedback to be solicited. And I'm just, hearing the concern about the weight on the agenda. There might be, and I'm happy as staff to kind of work with the planning team to re-engage in that conversation about if we could put a report like this up on DASH and put that way, and then this would be an opportunity similar to what you see with planning reports, where we might be able to bring back some of the comments and discuss them perhaps as sort of a starting point consultation. I'm happy to pursue that and to see that if we could make that work as a mechanism, just to try to attend to the mandate, but also allow the appropriate space within meetings.
Okay, last chance. Otherwise, well, not last chance, because you can contact or email with your thoughts. Otherwise, thank you very much. Colin, you're presenting on the first Capital Place illumination policy.
I don't know where they want this to hang.
Yes, thank you very much. And through you, Mr. Chair, again, this is a consultation opportunity with the committee. You do have a report today as part of your agenda about the fact that staff were mandated to do a one-year review of the illumination policy that was approved in 2017. The Heritage Kingston group was a stakeholder as part of the original sort of stakeholder consultation, and the report that's before you today highlights some of the main points that came forward from this committee at that time. Just by way of context for newer committee members, the upgrades to the lighting system on Kingston City Hall was a sesquicentennial initiative. There was a much older system that needed to be updated, and we had the opportunity at that time to install a new system that allowed us much more flexibility in terms of control, color, projection, and activating the building through and the area around the building through a much more robust illumination system, and that has been in place now for over a year. And as is outlined in the report, there are, I believe, 17 approved opportunities on which City Hall is illuminated that Council designated. And this is actually a joint effort between Cultural Services, Facilities, Office, because we've received requests as in accordance with the policy. And there's been about 32 requests that have come in at the time of writing of this report. So in the context of this meeting, and again, keeping in mind what's already been discussed about feedback mechanisms, we do want very much to hear from Heritage Kingston in terms of your assessment of the use of the lighting system, particularly around City Hall, noting that when this first came forward, there was concern about how it would impact the architecture of the building and the appreciation of that architecture. Our feeling is that even at a baseline, the new system is much more effective in terms of highlighting the architecture of the building. And we have also found that when it has been deployed to recognize different significant issues, the public response has been extremely positive to the fact that City Hall, like other historic facilities in major cities, has this opportunity to be illuminated in this way. So as has already been said, I'm happy to receive comments via email after this meeting, but I'm also happy to answer any questions you might have or entertain some immediate feedback you might have in this moment. And the plan is, I just should flag that we are getting input from a number of different stakeholders, including people who have made requests to have City Hall illuminated, and the plan is to bring a revised report back to administrative policies in mid-February. So that's the timeline that we're working on.
Good, thank you. Questions, comments, thoughts on the illumination of City Hall? Committee members, members of the public?
As a yes resident of downtown, I quite enjoyed the lighting scheme for the last bit, so good job.
Thank you.
This isn't a heritage issue, but the one day that I was surprised wasn't on the pre-approved, and it slipped right by me when the council approved them, would be Earth Day. Earth Day in late April, because Sustainable Kingston, lots of the community actively engage in that. So, and would that, should I send you an email, or can you just make it so?
That would be great. I will note it, but if you can send me an email as well, that would be great. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Councillor Neil. Other thoughts? Seeing none then, thank you.
Thank you.
Heritage assets, do we have reports from Pump House or McLaughlin? No? Okay, so we move on to D, statutory business. You're now on page 18 of the agenda, and we start with 942.
Okay, hi everyone. I haven't spoken to you yet today, but I'm Janice Grant, Heritage Planner on Greg's team, and I know you've probably gotten a ton of emails from me, so you know my name, but...
This is a part 4, which means that you will get to decide on it.
This one? Yeah. Okay, yes, so this is an application for alteration to a designated heritage property at Highway 2. So I'm going to be presenting the staff report that's included in your agenda. So this property is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, which, as a reminder, is an individual property designation, so there's no district plan associated with this property. So the property is located on the north side of Highway 2, east of Glenview Avenue and opposite of the entrance to the Ravensview wastewater treatment facility. The sizable lot, as you can see on the screen, contains a limestone dwelling, which is quite set back from the road, and a limestone coach house, which are connected with a number of more recent board and batten additions. The original 1.5-story limestone residence, which is known as the Clooney House, was constructed sometime between 1817 and 1820. The property was individually designated in 1982 under Part 4 of the Act. The designating bylaw, which is also included in your package there, references its architectural and its historical value, noting that the property is a good example of a rural limestone farmhouse, and it also has ties to Sir John A. Macdonald, as his aunts once lived on this property. So a series of rear board and batten additions, as I said, which are visible as distinct in this image roofed areas, were constructed sometime in the 1990s. The designating bylaw for this property actually predates these additions. The applicant is seeking approval under the Ontario Heritage Act to construct a new covered wooden deck extending from the western elevation of the rear addition. A new entrance is proposed in the rear addition in order to access the deck, and so you can see the proposed location there on the slide. So while the rear additions are not included as heritage attributes in the designating bylaw, the impact of this deck on the attributes of the property, including its rural character and of the original structure, have been considered in its review of this application. And this is just where the deck will be located, the rear addition there for reference. So the proposed deck will be constructed of wood and painted in an off-white or a cream color. It will have painted and fascia, railings, and balusters. The posts and balusters will be of a simple square design with minimal detailing. The roof will be a dark gray or a black metal roof to match the original building. A new opening is proposed to access the deck with double French doors, which match those that have been installed on the western elevation of the same addition. This application was reviewed by Heritage Kingston in November, so the term before you, and the applicant was very receptive to the feedback and recommendations that were put forward by members of the committee and by staff, and these have helped to shape this final submission you see in front of you. For example, the soffit, fascia, and railings were originally proposed to be aluminum. Committee comment, the applicant has revised the concept to instead include wooden elements. The design of the deck will complement the existing heritage features of the property, and the location of the deck is such that it will not detract from the form or design of the original Storm farmhouse or of the stone coach house. Staff support this proposal as it meets the standards and guidelines for conservation of historic places in Canada, which is the document that we presented earlier as kind of the accepted best practices included in your resource package. So it will comply with the recommendations for additions or alterations to heritage buildings outlined there, specifically as it pertains to constructing additions in locations that ensure the heritage value of the property is maintained, and that these additions are designed in a manner that is compatible with the historic building and its setting in terms of both materials and massing. Staff have no objections to this proposal and recommend approval of the application subject to the conditions that are outlined before you.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Done?
Well, I'm very pleased that the applicants responded to some suggestions that we made to have wooden rather than metal components to the deck. One suggestion that they did not change was the door opening. The plans show a double door. I don't know if we can go back to page 29. Yeah, you see in the lower right drawing there's a door which really stretches from window. And the suggestion was that the doorway is really rather crowded between the windows, and maybe a single door would be more appropriate. And I guess the applicant prefers to stay with the double door, and really it's not a big issue. I don't think we don't think that that's a big problem, but I'm a little concerned. If you 3-bay layout of that addition, it's nice and symmetrical with spaces between the windows and doors, and this is going to change that quite significantly. New committee members should realize that we have the opportunity to make amendments to the recommendations if we choose, which is not the case in Part 5. And I think I'd like to suggest a very minor amendment, just to encourage the applicant to think about that particular feature. And it's not a requirement. Sometimes we can make recommendations that are fairly strong, and this is not a strong recommendation. So what I'm going to do.
So Dom, when it's up, when it's been moved and seconded, then you'll be able to make that amendment?
Sorry.
Okay, we just took comments at present.
Yes, let's leave that.
Other comments? From anybody from the public? Yes. Could you use a microphone, do you think, please? Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Rod Stokes. I'm actually the agent for the owners and the designer of the project. I recognize in the comment, we did undertake, and we've confirmed on site that there is ample room for the double door. And the owner says, would really like that. It actually mirrors the double doors on the opposite elevation. In terms of the symmetrical, I think it does remain quite symmetrical when you look at the elevations with respect to the windows and doors centered in the porch itself, that it does remain quite symmetrical, and we're of the opinion that the double door is quite desirable.
Thank you.
I guess having heard, I'm satisfied to just leave the suggestion with you. What I was going to suggest was adding a condition that you think about again. So I guess you can do that, whether I put it in as a condition or not. I simply wanted to say that back doors architecturally do not have to match front doors. Often they're of lesser size and so on. And also, I think in my experience, double doors are very difficult to weatherproof to the same standard as single doors. So a single door, it would be would have much better thermal performance. But I'll just leave it there. That's just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Other? Seeing none then, look for a mover. There's the recommendation as printed in your agenda, the construction of a new wooden covered deck extending from the western elevation of the rear addition, the introduction of a new door opening install doors in the board and batten addition to access the covered deck, and the two conditions that are added to that. Looking for a mover. Councillor Neal, seconder, Don Taylor. Deliberations, comments, last chances? Oh yes, sorry, Matthew.
Try and find the page, but I think it just notes that it says that the deck, you guys made a suggestion that it be made out of wood instead of aluminum, like the soffit and fascia. And just wood seems really vague. Like, is that, what does that mean? Is it painted wood? Is it going to be V-grooves, cedar? Appropriate wood.
You're simply saying wood, and you're not being any more specific than that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it will be painted wood. I don't know if the agent for the applicant might want to speak a little more about the type of wood that he's proposing.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Definitely all the components are wood. They will be painted. As to the nature of the materials for the softened fascia, I think that's probably going to be pine or cedar.
Further thoughts? Seeing none then, those in favour? Those opposed? That is carried. 194 King Street East. Part 5, Ryan?
It's actually both, part 4 and 5.
Yeah.
Chair, so this one is one of those, I guess not all that unusual, but it's one of those hybrid designations where it was designated originally as individually as a separate heritage property, and then was included within the old Sydenham Heritage District under Part 5 at a later date. The property is located at the northwest side of Gore and King Street East in Sydenham Ward. It's a 1.5-story, originally rough-cast dwelling, now covered in a brick veneer, built before 1819. The district plan, so as I noted, it is designated under Part 4 individually, and then it was designated again under Part 5, included in the district plan. The designation notes that it's likely one of the earliest dwellings along this street and represents in its size and style the typical unpretentious cottage of the era. It also includes one of the early street signs that are fixed to the corner of the building, which is kind of an interesting feature. And it is rated as, or classified as the Heritage District. So the applications up before this committee today for comment is an application to repair both the brick and on the walls and the stone foundation on 3 sides of this building. So we're talking about the street-facing facade, the King Street facing facade, the front facade, the Gore Street facing facade, which I guess I call the side, and then the rear, which is opposite the King Street one. The front is a tight alley, and I understand from the applicant is not as deteriorated. They have included pictures showing some of the wear and tear on the building. While typically painting masonry is a known conservation, this particular building has been painted for many, many years, and the applicant does not have the will or resource to remove paint from the entire building. So she has indicated that they would like to retain the color in the paint and simply repair the damage that weather and time has done to the masonry. So in terms of our review, we have reviewed this application against the information provided alongside the designating information, the significance, and the policies and guidelines in the district plan. Works are encouraged to be undertaken in accordance with the Parks Canada standards and guidelines that are referenced, as well as the city's masonry policies. And our detailed analysis is in the report in your agenda, so I won't go through those in detail. We did circulate internally as well, and unfortunately not through this committee, as this one was sort of during transition of the committee's makeup. So we did receive comments from some internal agents, which are in the agenda package, and Mr. Chair, we recommend approval. And as you can see on the motion, it is that Heritage Committee, we recommended support for our motion. And the motion indicates approval of, as outlined in the details of the application, subject to 3 conditions. The first is regarding compliance with the city's masonry policy. The second is regarding the use of any new stones, if necessary, stones or bricks, that they be sourced and dressed so that they match. And finally is a permit requirement for an encroachment permit for our engineering staff should any of the work need to occur on a city road allowance. So those are our recommendations, Mr. Chair, and open to questions.
Thank you very much. I just make 2 comments on the way through. Firstly, on page 74 of your agenda, you see the page of the property inventory evaluation from the Sydenham District Report. And amongst those, there's the rating talked of before. And remind me before what S stands for?
Mr. Chair, that's significant to the district.
Significant. Okay, thank you. And the other 2 ratings are?
A contributing building, so it'd be a C rating, they call it, which are buildings that have a form and massing or material or some fashion that is sort of in keeping with the character of the area, but not of significance on its own. And then the final ranking is a non-contributing
ranking, which are buildings that are simply infill buildings that don't have particular heritage value.
Thank you. On page 82, Don, we have your dash comments.
Sorry, are you on the right?
I'm on page, am I on the right property here? No, I've gone 1, 2, page 2, sorry. That's what happens when you have 194 and 198 next to each other. What page do you have your dash comments on? 64 and 63, 64, sorry.
Mr. Chair, I'm afraid there are no dash comments from.
There are no
committee
dash
members
comments, that's why I
for
can't
this
find them.
particular
That's,
one. But we're open to receiving some.
Members of the public commenting on this? Seeing none. Any final comments from members of the committee? Done?
As you pointed out, we didn't have the opportunity to submit comments through Dash. I guess I would have liked to know something about the paint that is to be applied. Paint used on brick should be porous enough to allow some breathing of the brick. And you can see from the photographs that showed deterioration, you can see the paint is peeled off, which suggests that the water penetration and it wasn't able to evaporate out. So I think it's important that the paint be actually specified or identified as being suitable for painting masonry. So that's a comment that should be in the file, I think.
Thank you. And for new media, that is part of the Heritage Resource Centre is available for people to go and ask about what types of material should be used. Was there any discussion with the owners here on the type of paint?
Mr. Chair, there was not, but for comfort's sake, for some of the members who may know the name Craig Sims, he is acting as an agent for this particular owner, and he is well familiar with proper heritage techniques. So I have confidence in their
Okay,
process.
thank you very much. There are various people in town whose names you will hear, and when they get mentioned, you can assure that the quality of the work will be fine. Craig Sims is a nationally recognized conservation person living in Barryfield, and when he is involved, I don't ask any more questions, and I see Don smiling as well. Further comments from the committee?
I had a comment about the paint color. When I looked at it in the file, I couldn't see the colors, obviously, but I'm just wondering if they're amenable to change. I can see that the brick is different, underneath is different, is a different color than the paint that's actually on it. Was that discussed at all, or it's a similar color? So I'm just wondering how subtle that is.
If you've ever met the owner of this particular building, she's very passionate about her building. She loves her little building, and is quite keen on this particular color. So, as my understanding, she's going to try to replicate as close as possible with the majority color of the building. I'm not sure the history of when that underlying darker tone was added, but I don't believe her intent is to replicate that. I think she'd like to keep the sort of lighter shade of red.
Further comments? Seeing none, then, you are asked to support yes or no on the staff recommendation, bottom of page 49, page 50. Masonry, well, we had it on the screen, we don't have it now. Masonry repairs, repointing, thank you very much, you have it there. Need a mover and a seconder for this. Don as mover, Matthew to second. Those in favour? Those opposed? That is carried. Moving down the street to 198, which is still a part 5. Thank you.
Okay, hello again. So this is an application for alteration to a property which is designated similarly to its neighbor at 194 under both Parts 4 and Parts 5 of the Act. So the subject property is located on the west side of King Street between Earl and Gore Streets. The property contains a 2-story, 3-bay brick dwelling which was built in 1853. It was individually designated under Part 4 in 1984 through designating bylaw 8465. The bylaw notes the architectural value of the property and states that the 2-story brick dwelling is an important part of the King Street streetscape. The property was also designated under Part 5 of the Act as part of the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District. The property is located specifically within the King Street corridor sub-area, which is defined as part of the HCD plan. This corridor is defined as a ceremonial entrance to the downtown, and its heritage attributes include buildings that form a strong edge. The evaluation form for this property similarly notes that it is significant to the district. So the applicant is seeking heritage approval to replace the existing asphalt shingle roof with a new metal roofing system and to raise the stone step at the front entrance facing onto King Street. So in terms of the roof, the subject property currently has a simple gable roof with end parapets. The existing asphalt shingles are a dark gray color. They've reached the end of their life, and so the applicant is proposing to replace them with a simple metal roofing system sympathetic to both the age and architectural style of the building in a dark gray or black color, similar to what exists. This proposal satisfies the guidelines of Section 5.3.1, alterations to heritage properties of the HCD plan. In terms of the front step, the applicant has noted that the step has sunken over the years, and as you can see, there's now a pretty significant gap between the second and the third step there, which is making it difficult to access the building. The applicant has confirmed that they're not proposing to remove or alter any of the existing steps, but to raise the second step and introduce a new step underneath it in order to make that easier to access. So they're working with local stonemasons to determine the best method for doing this, but have confirmed that there will be no alterations to the stones as they exist. So the front doorway is noted as an attribute of the property in the evaluation form, but the raising of this step is not anticipated to affect this heritage attribute and will also increase use of this original front entrance. So Heritage Kingston members reviewed this application in November and noted that a metal roofing system in the goes is sympathetic to both the character of the structure and provided recommend the applicant in terms of gauge durability of the roofing system. A committee member noted that the addition of a snow guard also should be considered to prevent snow from the stone entrance with the change from asphalt to metal. The committee did not know any concerns pertaining to the raising of the front step. Staff have relayed these recommendations to the applicant and have also included a condition that staff are able to review the final specifications for the roofing system to ensure they're consistent with the comments from committee members. And staff have no concerns with the application as it's consistent with both best practices and the policies of the HCD plan. Staff recommend approval of this application subject to conditions outlined before you, which are, once again pertain to having final specifications for the roofing system in terms of gauge and line that they choose to go with, and that an encroachment permit be required, which is a requirement of engineering.
Thank you very much. Don, your dash comment is on 82, and it's been dealt with. Thank you. Members of the public? Seeing none, comments from the committee? Matthew. Don't forget to use the microphone.
Sorry, I don't know if we're supposed to dive into this, but it makes note here, the Havelock heritage profile. I don't know, are we supposed to make comments like suggesting when they do the installation, like the things I didn't see noted here? There was no talk of like making sure that the parapet cap was matching, which might be helpful because like when you make your order to that supplier, they'll send you extra material for your installer to make that's like not at the profile, so that at least it's from the same color code, as well as the appropriate stock for the flashing around the chimneys. I don't know. This might be a nice little, rather than try and deal with it afterwards. That's all, sorry. I don't know if I'm supposed to say things like that or not. This might be helpful.
The fact that the final roofing system is going to be reviewed, presumably you will keep the staff will keep those comments in mind. Yep. Other comments? Oh, I'm sorry, Greg. When you sit in a window in this room, it's so difficult to see. Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to the commenters' comments. Like, I think that's exactly the sort of feedback that we want to hear, ideally through the Dash platform, because then the planner on the file can have that conversation with the applicant and be prepared to say how that feedback or not into the proposal. So please keep that sort of technical feedback coming in to review these files.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I don't think any comment is irrelevant. It may not be followed up, but staff always welcome, especially from your particular expertise. Any other comments? So we need a mover and a seconder to support the staff recommendation, which you have on the screen. Jane moved, seconder. Matthew, thank you. You're voting to approve the staff recommendation then. Those in favour? Those opposed? Thank you very much. The update on the 2018 Heritage Grants Programme. Oh, you're there, Ryan. Thank you. Page 84.
I don't really have a presentation. This one, Mr. Chair, it's simply a information report for the committee. Just to step back, as Greg mentioned earlier today, the city has 2 financial incentive programs for protected heritage properties. Now that's different than the Heritage Fund that our Cultural Services colleagues mentioned. These are specifically tied to protected heritage properties. The tax refund program is one that we'll be reviewing hopefully later this year. But the Heritage Grant program was one that was updated last year. And as part of the approval of that update, Council, through recommendation from this group, asked that staff report back following the 2018 program to discuss, to provide an overview of how the program went and any lessons learned and open for comments. So that's what's before you today. The grant program for applications in February last year, or late January, I guess, until the end of April, and we received 23 applications for grants. The grant program is a matching grant up to $5,000 for work that specifically helps to conserve the heritage value of a property. And of the 23, I believe a few of them were ineligible for various reasons. We ranked the rest of them as per the bylaw criteria and stipulation. And we successfully handed out 10 grants of $5,000 each. The recipients were very receptive, very excited about their grants. The projects were of high quality, and we were very impressed by the received. We feel that the current program is working effectively, and it's providing the owners of these protected properties a valuable opportunity for funding for tangible works to their property that's contributed directly from the city. So we're open to questions, and I threw up on the screen here a copy of the new signage that we put out this year in front of each of the successful recipients to showcase for the public's benefit where the funding went, and we think it was fairly successful too. So, if you have any questions, Mr. Chair.
Good, thank you. No, I had loved the signs. It's really neat driving around the city and coming across the signs. Questions to Ryan on the grants? Seeing none then, while you're there, Ryan, we've taken 47 Wellington Street off of the agenda. Has the whole application been withdrawn, or can we still go and look at the property, or what?
That application was for a substantial addition to the rear of the former Wellington Street School. I'm sure you've seen it is on the agenda, of course. The applicant contacted us yesterday, and they changes to their plans. So they thank the members who've provided comments, and they will be reviewing those and providing an updated illustration of their design. That being another application similar to this one for comments or an actual heritage permit. So we'll wait and see, and we'll report back shortly.
Okay, thank you very much. Heritage orientation. Yeah.
Sorry.
Is anybody speaking on this, or is this just a review of everything that we went through this morning?
Through you, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
This is, we have gone through the process of providing the orientation of both the statutory and non-statutory. We appreciate the committee's interest and attention during what was a prolonged but important information to help set the stage for the work that's to come. And always we're welcoming questions if there are any, but as has been reinforced, staff across both departments, planning, building, and licensing, as well as cultural services, are always available and accessible if you have questions or things to follow up on.
Great, thank you. And it's so nice to have links right through to all those instead of carrying piles and piles of paper around. Working groups. As you've realized, there are 3 working groups, and we received the minutes of those notes. Jennifer, do you want to comment on those?
Yes, thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the working group notes that come forward, you'll hear me as we have committee meetings talk to them at times, are relevant and maybe would prompt conversation. The working group reports that have been brought forward this time from my team include the Cultural Heritage Working Group. I won't speak to them at length. I just wanted to, this is a space where you would see the conversations at a high level that are happening at the Cultural Heritage Working Group, specific to Your Stories, Our Histories, Engage for Change, and other of those intangible items that are part of that mandate. So thank you.
And just quickly on the Heritage Properties Working Group, that particular group, as we spoke about this morning, looks at designations and does research on properties. Cultural Heritage have looked at, as you can see by the notes, a couple of properties recently that came up. One of the big projects that this group will be involved in is reviewing the various statements of significance for the Queen's buildings as part of the update to their easement agreement. So that includes, I think we're in the neighborhood of 70 or 80 properties or buildings. So it's going to be a bit of a project. So, and our next meeting, I think, is the 29th of this month.
Thank you. Yes, sometime when we've got less business, we'll talk about why Queens gets dealt with differently. There really is a reason. I need a motion then to approve receiving those 2 working group reports. Moved by Don, seconded by Jane. Thank you very much. Any comments? Further comments? Seeing none. Those in favour? Those opposed? They have been received then. And updating emergency approvals? None. Thank you very much. For new members again, as you've realized, it can be quite a slow process putting through an application. Falls on your roof and you're in a designated property, you need to work fast. And so there is a process for emergency approvals. Maybe, Ryan, sometime when the agenda is a little thinner, you might just want to comment on how you deal with emergency. Appointments to the Heritage Kingston members to the working groups. Jennifer, sorry.
Basically, staff briefly spoke to the mandates for the working groups in their earlier presentation. They're defined further in the committee bylaw if anyone has specific questions, but at this time, we're just wondering if any committee members would like to serve on any of the working groups, and we'll probably include this item on as well so everyone can weigh in. So if anyone would like to volunteer today, that's fine, and if not, we can talk about it again.
Good, thank you for that. You can see we're not coordinated yet, but you're doing excellent for filling in those spots. So if you've heard something that you're interested in, let us know. Jim?
Jim, would, like many of our committees, would any member of this committee be considered an ex officio non-voting member if they saw something on an agenda that they wanted to working group?
Jennifer?
Thank you, and through you. They're always open to attendance by the public, so if there is an item that is forthcoming at a working group and you're not a sitting member of that working group, you're always welcome to come and give your input. That's true of any community member, and I believe right now the communications team at the city is starting to publish the working group dates if anyone wanted to see them ahead of time. I would point out that, of course, if we got all of the members of Heritage Committee at a working group, we would, of course, then have a committee meeting. So if you are intending to attend, it's always nice if you can give me a heads up for ours, and I expect the same for Ryan, just so we can make sure that doesn't happen.
Thank you.
Good, you're welcome. So item H, the appointment of public members. Oh, does anybody want to sign up for President Don?
I thought you were asking if any of us wanted to serve, and I'm continue on the Heritage Properties Working Group.
On the Heritage Properties Working Group, if you can add Don's name to that. Jane?
If you need a Heritage Properties Working Group, I'd be happy to serve there.
Thank you very much. I've never known one to refuse. Matthew?
I can do the North Kingstown working group as well.
Let's leave that till we get to the next one, so I'll keep you in mind for that. Excellent. Not looking over there. Okay. Appointment of public members to the Heritage Properties Working Group. We will need a mover and a seconder that Robert Caldwell, Helen Finley, and Edward Grender be appointed as public members to the Heritage Properties Working Group with a term expiring on November the 30th, 2019. Moved by Jim Neal, seconded by Don Taylor. Thank you. Get you next time, Zoe. Discussion. Seeing none, those in favor, those opposed. So you have 3 members also on that working group. North Kingstown Secondary Plan Community Working Group. Matthew, you'd like to go on to that one? We got numbers? Just one, okay.
I'd like to be on that one as well.
You'd be interested in that as well?
Yes, please.
Jennifer, is that your group? No.
Greg can speak to its function.
Greg, do you want to, can you take 2? An advisor?
I mean, maybe formally we'll identify one, but we can certainly have both. Yeah, that's fine. It'd be good, actually, I think, to have both, so.
Let out who the official one is and who otherwise. Yep. Jennifer?
I'm not trying one today, and I certainly think time is warranted for the next meeting, but I would just like to point out that neither the Heritage Assets Working Group or the Cultural Heritage Working Group currently have any active members of this committee sitting on them. I think we lost you, and then we lost you. Your chair used to be a member and has stepped down most recently, and so just wanted to put that out there for consideration.
Yeah. Greg, could you, on the North Kingstown, just give some idea of the number of meetings and the timeline that we're dealing with?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Right now we're at within stage 2 of the project, which is looking at the technical components of bringing the vision to reality. We have a number of working group meetings to review the first iteration of the technical study. So there's a servicing plan, transportation plan, and cultural heritage plan. So I suspect we'll have, over the course of the next 6 months, maybe 1 or 2 more meetings. And over the course of the entire year, perhaps another 1 or 2. So max 4, I would estimate right now for the year.
You still both want to sit? We've got to put one name officially before I toss my coin. So who? Oh, okay. Heads, it is Matthew. To the other side, it is Jennifer. It's Jennifer. You're going to object?
No, but I'll just point out that most of these committees seldom ever come down to a one-vote decision. And the chairs typically recognize any to the meeting for input and influence.
Yep.
So even if we end up with only one vote from this committee, view would be recognized and valued for your input.
So formally, though, we do need would appoint Jennifer as the Heritage Kingston member to the North Kingstown Secondary Plan Community Work. Have a mover. Matthew, very good. Nice. And seconder? Zoe, I missed you out before, didn't I? Excellent. Those in favour? Those opposed? That's carried. And yeah, feel free to go as well. Okay, the review of Heritage Kingston. This was a motion that was 2017. That's right, 2 years, at least in 2017, was deferred for a whole year, and then there was no December meeting of the Heritage Committee, so it's on to this meeting. The seconder is on the committee, so we have a mover, and I'm looking for a seconder for this motion, which basically for a review of the activities of Heritage Kingston. So do I have a seconder, Jim? Thank you very much. And I don't think we have any particular procedures here, do we, apart from dealing with the regular motions? But the mover gets to speak first.
Yes, and I imagine staff will want to provide comments at some point on this.
And staff may well want to comment on this as well. So Don, it's yours.
When Heritage Kingston was set up nearly 3 years ago, there was considerable concern and controversy about the arrangements. And anyway, since that time, there has been ongoing concerns and requests for a review of the committee. And that has never happened, but I think it is time to have that review. New committee members may have concerns about dealing with this motion since they have little experience with it, but I think to move this to council quickly so that the serious problems that have continued can be addressed. There's plenty of evidence for this. Although the motion did not come to a vote last year, committee members have voted with their feet. Since Heritage Kingston was set up nearly 3 years ago, 7 members have resigned and 2 chose not to seek reappointment. Meetings were cancelled or stopped for lack of quorum. The chair, Councillor Stroud, stated at the last meeting that the committee's procedures were unacceptable and he would not accept reappointment. So many departures from the committee are unprecedented in the 18 or so years on the committee. I think many of you have probably seen an article in the Whig Standard by Elliot Ferguson on December the 7th that described the problems of the committee and included comments from former members who are experts on heritage design and renovation. There isn't time to go into all the complicated details, but I'll 2 main points. The first is a mismatch between the interests of committee members and the actual business of the committee. Heritage Kingston was set up with about half of the members having experience in heritage buildings and about half with interests in general cultural heritage. In practice, heritage building applications, which are often complex and time-sensitive, took up 90% of the meetings, and there's little business on general cultural heritage. Those who were not particularly interested in built gradually disappeared. Second, built heritage members were unhappy with new procedures that gave them little or no input on many alterations applications. When Heritage Kingston was set up, staff introduced a new interpretation of the Ontario Heritage Act. Although applications for properties with individual designations require recommendations from the Heritage Committee, staff claimed that properties in heritage conservation districts did not. As a result, about 2/3 of the city's heritage properties immediately lost the protection of the Heritage Committee. This includes landmark buildings such as City Hall, St. George's, Courthouse, Cartwright House, many, many others. A fundamental Ontario Heritage Act is to protect heritage properties by requiring councils to consult heritage committees on applications for alterations, and all other municipalities in Ontario follow that procedure. In addition to this, the city has a delegation procedure to approve minor alterations without consulting the committee. However, staff were discussed minor and what was major. and some very substantial renovations were approved as minor, and the committee never heard of them. Alterations of heritage properties are often complex, and best outcomes require free discussion among applicant committee members and heritage staff. Committee members, realizing that these procedures had shut them out of effective interactions with applicants, felt they were wasting time and left the committee. Some of us stayed on hoping that the city would carry out a review as they promised, but that hasn't happened. This motion does not recommend specific changes, it simply calls for a review, and for a review carried out by persons with direct experience in protecting Kingston's heritage. We'll approve it. Thank you.
Jim, you want to comment?
Just quickly, being a closet type A personality, I spoke to a number of people that are previous members of the committee and to a couple of the current members. And I think that there were enough questions raised that a review, in my mind, makes sense. I spoke with one person who asked to remain anonymous, but she came with a very strong culture background. She didn't last the full period of her term because she felt she didn't bring a lot of value added to the discussions around built heritage. And she was somewhat fearful of having, if she left a meeting early, that quorum would be threatened. And so she was kind of in a frustrating position. And I think there was a certain commitment made for a review, and perhaps a new committee bringing fresh perspective to the process would make sense for a review to take place at this time. So I support the motion.
Thank you. Other public members? Yep, please.
Everyone. My name is Shirley Bailey, and I'm president of the Frontenac Heritage Foundation. Our foundation has been around since 1972, and our express purpose is to protect built heritage in the Kingston region, not just the city of Kingston, but all the municipalities around. So we do a number of things. Very quickly, we try to have monthly speaking events. We, 2 years ago, had the Dry Stone Festival in Berryfield. We have an awards ceremony each fall, and we ourselves own a building on Brock Street, 6266 Brock, and over the next several months, you will see a heritage permit come in because we have to replace the chimney. Anyway, but what I want to say about this is that we have been consistent in our concern about of the Part 5 in the legislation. I won't go into a lot of details, but the legislation prior to 2005 was very specific in terms of requiring consultation of the committee on Part 5s. After that, yes, the legislation is vague. But when you look at the number of municipalities across the province that have chosen to consult with their heritage committee on Part 5 matters, it is by far the majority. All municipalities larger than Kingston that have district plans approved since 2005 consult with their heritage committee. So what we have seen as a result of what's happened is we have over 115 members, so we talk to a lot of people, some of them who have Part 4s, Part 5s, and some who are not in heritage buildings. But there is a concern, as you saw earlier in the conversation, that the city in the official plan has a number of proposed districts. But with the way the Part 5 properties are handled, people don't want a district anymore here. And people are actually sorry that we approved the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District. And this is a really sorry, I'm sorry for the municipality of Kingston, which, I don't need to remind you, we're sitting in a National Historic Site. This was the first capital of Canada. I mean, we're the laughing stock of the province now. It's, from a heritage point of view, it's really, really disappointing to have this situation here. So we would support the call for a review of the mandate. We would like there not to be sort of a restriction in terms of the scope, and we would be happy to help in any way that we can to expedite this. So I thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all the comments I had.
Thank you very much. Other staff? Other last thoughts? Oh, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The amending of a committee mandate is always in order. It is clear within our committee bylaw that based on a resolution of the committee or a report to council, that council will consider amending the mandate of the committee. And there's a number of different criterions that are outlined in the committee bylaw that impact on that. And they're based on results of the committee's annual report, impact of the change of the mandate in the terms of reference, continued relevance of the committee function, the degree of public interest, changes to the applicable legislation or regulations, changing council priorities or new issues at council, cost analysis and required resources, and the committee sunset date. So any review that would be undertaken by a working group or whatnot would take that into consideration. So the idea of having such a motion on the floor is in order. One caution that's picking up on Mr. Taylor's comment on the new membership. The committee is aware that this is the first meeting of this particular committee, and that the members are appointed to the committee based on the current mandate that's in place. And committee members might want to give some thought to the prematurity of this motion at this time in order to allow both the old members and new members of the committee an opportunity to digest how working with the current mandate will work going forward. But whatever the committee decides that they want to do, the motion will go up to council, and council will make that ultimate decision, and staff will support whatever decision that council makes, even based on what this committee decides. The only caution, as I said, is the idea that it is a new committee, and that's basically it, at least from our perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Others? Yes, Jim.
Just the mandate of this committee is indeed to be advisory. So given our terms of reference and the committee, I think the request for a review of the committee is a sensible thing. And staff will have an opportunity to answer questions and discuss that with whatever recommendation, and if indeed a recommendation goes forward to council at that time. I think we're within our mandate, given the description of us, our committee. So again, I support the motion.
Last call. Don, do you want to close discussion?
Really nothing to add, except that I hope this goes forward promptly rather than waiting for, really takes some months, many months, for new committee members to fully come to grips on all aspects of the work before them. But we have the experience of the previous committee. I think that's plenty of evidence to make a decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the motion you have on in the agenda gives the membership the scope of the and a time limit within 1 year. Those in favour, sorry. Yes, that's right. You do have the possibility of amending or of defer motion. Jim?
I don't wish to do either of those things, but I'm just curious about the timeline. When if this passes and then goes on as a recommendation and is passed at council, and we'll miss next Tuesday's meeting, but it would go to the first meeting in February. When do you anticipate the ad would go out, and when would the appointments come to nominations committee?
Mr. Chair, we would be prepared to already start drafting the advertisement and the other social media type of communications shortly after the council meeting. And based on applications, call a nominations advisory committee meeting, then fast track those recommendations to council.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Last chance. Seeing none, those in favor? Those opposed? That is carried.
Could minutes show that it passed unanimously?
Yes, it did pass unanimously. Yep. Notices of motion. Other business? Done.
To prolong things, but I think there should be some brief discussion about the time of the meeting. For most of the years I've had this, been on this committee, we've met in the afternoons. We moved to the mornings a few years ago. My understanding, this was mainly to accommodate Councillor Stroud's medical duties. But I think there's a real disadvantage to have it in the mornings because people trickle away as they have other commitments, whereas if it starts in the afternoon, we're less likely to lose quorum. So I think we should at least consider moving the time to the afternoon. I realize that staff must have input to this discussion as well, but I think it should be open to consideration. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. The fact that it's open to consideration, I think we'll start looking around and seeing. It depends on a clerk's availability, it depends on the space availability, and it does depend on, obviously, on members who may have committed themselves to Wednesday mornings. But we can look into that, Jim.
Just quickly, planning similar debate about changing the time. I will say, changing a date, as I understand it from the clerks, is after the schedule has gone out for the year. It may be less problematic to change the time if there's a consensus or near consensus of the committee.
We'll talk around and see what we can find.
And staff, we should definitely make sure staff can be here.
Yep. So, next meeting, February the 20th, 9:30. Move to adjourn. Jim, thank you. Everybody, I know that's always the fast one. Thank you very, very much. It's always tough as a